everybody. Good morning to you, good afternoon to you. My name is Steve Thompson. I'm from VPS over here in the UK, representing the team in EMEA, and I'm joined today by my colleague Bob Shostak. And Bob's over in North America, in Michigan. So this is the second day of our forum. We're going to continue to explore the themes of value through partnership in a learning and development environment. So welcome to all of you who've joined us for the first time, and a big thanks to all of you who stayed with us for the second day. And we really appreciated your feedback yesterday, and we hope now that the format of 3 presentations, discussion in between works for you, and that you can able to balance into your working day. We'd urge you obviously to stay with us right through the duration. So if you can join us actively, that's perfect. If you have to have us in the background, maybe while you answer mails or tend to anything else, that's equally valid, because I think you'll hear things through the afternoon that should pique your interest. If not to listen to Bob, certainly hope to listen to me, but most importantly to listen to the guests that we've got lined up with us today. So, as it's the second day, we thought we'd just take a minute or two to refresh what we talked about yesterday, and between the two of us, hopefully give you an edited highlight of what went on. So if we just look, first of all, we started by reviewing where people thought they were, and we used the basis of our survey that we conducted last year and published last year, the Learning Priorities Report, which Bob, if you recall, that included input from 150 HR and learning leaders across the globe. But we supplemented that yesterday with getting the feedback and input from I think it was over 120 people joined us at the start yesterday to get their impression of what they thought their key challenges were facing 2025. And that gave us an insight really into what they're facing, what you're facing, what we're facing together as hopefully partners and colleagues on this journey in looking forward. And if we look on the screen, maybe Bob, you can just talk us through some of the things that came up. We did it on a Mentimeter, and we're going to encourage you all to use a Mentimeter today. So I'll be asking you more questions, and I'm going to give you a chance, Bob, just maybe to reflect on some of the priorities that the team highlighted in their own feedback yesterday.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Looking at this chart, it's really not surprising what came up as the key topics. AI certainly being the primary one. That was a theme throughout all the presentations and discussions yesterday. We had a lot of good thought input on that, and I'm sure we'll continue to have some of that today in the discussions and the presentations. The other thing I found really interesting about that chart is leadership being highlighted as well. Because to me, that's still leadership of what it means to be a leader, adapting to leadership in a changed world, changed environment, and even in the age of AI. So the roles of leaders continue to change, but the skills and behaviors that were persistent are still needed, but it also requires some adaptation. So those were really the 2 things that I took away from it.
I think that's really important. You picked up on the theme of adaptation, personalization. I think everyone talked a lot about the great technology we've got available to us, but it's only great technology if it's relevant to the challenges ahead of us. And I know from the mix of people on the call, all of us involved in L&D in some circumstance, trying to influence an organization by providing great learning is one thing. Talking to people outside who can help us provide great learning is actually a tactic that enables us maybe to make the most of the technology that's available to us. And so much discussion on AI, and we've got a big session on AI as we go through the presentation today. So this is a snapshot yesterday. We'll be asking for more snapshots as we go through today. One thing I wanted to say is just hopefully you were ignited by this and want to take part in this year's survey. And we're going to be running the survey again. There will be a link made available to you in the post-conference pack that will be going out. If you're impatient and can't wait, you can click on the QR code that's on the screen now, or follow the link that will be in the chat room as we go through. One thing I wanted to say, Bob, and I didn't say it yesterday, but I wanted to now mimic all those YouTubers that I admire and ask people, if you're watching us on YouTube, and about 50% of the audience are watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you like and subscribe, there's all sorts of treats that we can provide you. But hopefully you do, because that's really key. Our LinkedIn participants, again, I think well over half of our audience yesterday were LinkedIn participants. We've already talked to you through our monthly newsletter. We also have the opportunity to invite you to events like this. And I think it's key that not only for us, obviously, we want to invite you to discussions with us, but I really hope, and I know, Bob, you do the same, we wanted this event to be a platform to ignite discussion amongst yourselves in terms of how you make the most of the learning opportunities that your organisation has, how you can actually, if you like, make the most of the opportunity you have in terms of your budget allocation. We know none of us have got infinite budgets, so there's maybe ideas, maybe tips and tricks that you can pick up from your colleagues on this call, maybe relationships that you can develop through people you might meet in the chat room. That sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? Pick the right kind of people you might meet in the chat room, and you can follow up and ignite discussion that way. And that's what it's really about for us. Today is the opportunity to come together with a shared purpose to help our businesses perform better, to help people gain experience, gain their own satisfaction through learning, but above all, help their businesses go better in the marketplace today. So, as we record back, we wind back, if you like, 24 hours, I just want to share, again, the very quick highlights of what we talked about. Firstly, we start with Andy Lancaster. Andy talked to us, as you can see, there are actually his shoes on the screen there. You didn't see them he was sat down yesterday, you didn't see him on the presentation. But Andy talked to us about the trends that he's seeing in his work. He talked about the skills agenda. Now, we've talked a lot, I know, internally with our customers about the skills-based organisations that are now emerging from more traditional environments. Was there anything in particular about Andy's presentation that really resonated with you?
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned the skills, and I think it is his focus on skills, and we've seen that in the broader community as well, of moving from competency to skills-based type of thing. And there's obviously a lot of things out there on upskilling and reskilling, but I think what Andy talked about, and part of what stood out for me, was getting down to the determination of how you go about identifying those skills and then how you utilize them as an organization. A lot of different ways of doing that, but yeah, that focus for me specifically really stood out of narrowing it down to that.
I like that as well, and he's kindly actually made available to us some research that he's just recently done, where he's isolated 75 different skills that he's done some research through his work with the CIPD over here in the UK, and they're available to everyone in terms of his analysis, his reflection, and possibly areas which we can all target on. They'll be part of the handout pack that is made available to us. As coming on the screen now is access to his two books that were referred to by himself, and also the following speaker, Lars from Todera. And again, this will be made available to you. Andy's celebrated author. Someone asked me last night, how did you find Andy? And it wasn't in a local pub or hostelry. We actually looked Andy up, followed the communities that we're part of, and through these books, the way that resonated, they're actually, and I won't embarrass him, well, I will embarrass him, they were the best-selling books that made available to us through LinkedIn last year, and there's good understanding why, easy to follow, and very relevant to the conversation we're having. So our next presentation was with Lars Hyland, who built on the skills idea, and Todera, we know, provide very flexible LMS systems, have done for a number of years. We've used them with our customer base. And Lars talked about how they are developing as a company to look beyond provision of just LMS and technology, picking up on the earlier theme. But he introduced the idea of a training maturity model, or reintroduced the idea of a training maturity model. I know Lars wouldn't purport to be the inventor of that. I think Maslow may have had something to do with that in the early days. But he talked about the challenges that they are using technology to help them address in terms of moving from a transactional model of learning to a more value-add model of learning. And again, I think we've seen that reflected in the kind of business that we're seeing with our customers as well.
Yeah, Steve, just to add to that real quick, I love the maturity model in there. as my training and education is as an organizational psychologist. And I think that type of contextual psychological piece is often neglected or needs to have a little bit more attention when we do change management within organizations. So it's not just doing all these things, but how we go about it, the effect it has on people, and taking those things into consideration in our planning and rollout. So I love that model.
Yeah, it was great. And here again, Lars has kindly given us a link to his company, and there's a QR code appearing on the screen now that does that. And there was a link between the two, which I quite like. There was the model that Lars put together, and there was the Joss Arrett's model of performance-based learning, which Andy had, and I saw a real crossover between the two, and again, worth dwelling on. As we close the afternoon out, we brought it a little bit closer to home. Louisa Warren Price took us through some work that we've been doing in the automotive sector, work on virtual worlds, a provision of virtual worlds with Ineos Automotive. And I enjoyed that story because they're a new customer, they've got a new product, and they've taken a new approach to the traditional world of automotive training. I know you and I are old pros in terms of automotive training. I know it doesn't look like we're old pros, Bob, but trust me, we are. And I thought there were some great lessons that came out of that, and particularly the idea, which I think looped back to a theme that I know we're going to pick up in a few minutes with Michael, of scalability, picking the challenges that are appropriate to the organization, linking back to a governance and communication, as well as the superb technology that the team have utilized from partners working with the Ineos group. Again, I mean, that excited me. We've got the case study that's available to people. I think that was a good way to end the day.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. The one thing that really stood out for me on that and was highlighted in the panel discussions later on was that this was an appropriate use of the technology. We talked a lot about how sometimes in the AI arena in particular, it feels like there's technologies looking for a solution out there. And this was not one of those cases of force fitting it to there. And the use of the virtual to meet the scalability needs in this instance was absolutely spot on. It's not appropriate for every circumstance. You don't want to do it just because it's there. But I think you guys laid out, you and Louisa laid out the exact reasons why this was appropriate and the best method and modality for this. And I think that was very valuable.
Absolutely, and the partnership came out of that because both parties had an ambition to reflect the unique needs of the network. Both parties didn't know what exactly that would be at the end. We had a vision, but were able to flex, adapt, and try and provide, I like your phrase, the appropriate level of technology for the challenge at that particular time. And I'm hoping that came out. And again, more of information is available on that. I want to move on to our first input for today. I'll quickly go through the agenda that people can see. So let's move on to the phase. I mean, we're here as VPS. What do VPS know about this? Well, we're involved in end-to-end learning across the globe. Bob's in the States. I'm over here in Europe. We work constantly together. And I probably see more of you than my wife this week, Bob, which is her relief. But yeah, we work together on solutions for franchise manufacturers. We work for technical companies. We work in government. We work in defense. And so we see a lot of people. There are some statistics coming up now, Bob, that I think you'll recognize on the screen, which just show the strength and breadth of the organization across the globe. I mean, we're in 56 countries. Just under 750,000 learners pass through our books each year. But that alone is not enough, is it?
No, Steve, it's I think these are great numbers. They're numbers that we're proud of, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to bring this offering to the public, to the community. Was we see a lot of things over the years that we've been doing this and want the opportunity to share. But I think it gets back to the human element of this. There's been all these changes in technology, advances in technologies, improvements in media. I mean, look at the platform we're using yesterday and today to even host this type of event, which would not have been possible a decade ago.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it's really people it's people. It's people in organizations. Organizations are made up of people that provide the synergies and partnerships that create the type of results that we talked about yesterday, and we're going to be talking about today as well. So, yeah, really just I think at the end of the day, it's people, it's partnership that make things work, and we're excited to share more of that with folks today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's move on then. Let's have a look at what we're going to do. So I talked a little bit about the presenters available to us that we're going to see. So our keynote speech today is going to come from our colleague. We've worked on the receiving end of his podcast and his broadcast, so he deserves to have it done back to him. But he's very kindly volunteered to give us his time, and that's Michael Rochelle. And Michael is the principal analyst with the Brandon Hall Group, the leader of the Brandon Hall Group, with over 40 years of experience in the industry. And he's online as we speak, and he'll probably fade into the screen when we get to the end of the agenda. So Michael's going to be with us for the first part, make the presentation, and join us for a panel discussion towards the end of the day. We're going to be supported again by Andy Lancaster. Andy, we had with us yesterday as our keynote speaker talking about trends in 2025. Published author, as we said, and as you'll see, a really energetic addition to the forum today. We're also joined, and pleased to be joined, coming from France, especially today, Annie Bayou. Annie is let me get this right, the Workforce Agility Officer in Residence. That's quite a mouthful. At Cornerstone On Demand, and they are a partner of ours who we're working with some key accounts, but they're taking a really fresh view in terms of how they're going to integrate AI as an enabling agent within the broader business, but still keep the principles of sound learning development practice in place. So Annie's going to take us through some of the latest thinking that they've got in that area and be around to take questions again during the panel discussion. She may actually be available in the early discussion as well. We're going to take a customer view as well, and we're very pleased to be joined with one of our long-standing customers and somebody who's given us some fantastic challenges to rise to over the years. I think you'd agree, Bob. You've worked with him as well as I have. Tony Battle from the Detroit Energy team, DTE. And they are a long-standing partner, and I think Tony wants to talk to us about how you need to ebb and flow and flex and bring in new ideas constantly to engage your workforce. And Tony couldn't do that alone. He's supported ably by our colleague, Sarah Markland. Sarah's a program manager working with you, as you know, in the US. And Sarah will help keep us on track as well. And I'm sure she will temper Tony's enthusiasm as we get to the end of that presentation. So, highly energetic day. It comes together in a full program. And that full program will be a mix of in and out, and hopefully give you all as viewers time to dive in as you see fit. We're going to start with the Leading Through Change presentation. We're going to have some virtual coffee breaks. Bob, I think it's worth saying there is a special guest alongside Douglas at the virtual coffee breaks.
Oh yeah, that alone is worth the price of admission. So
that is, Bob, he's so modest. He's going to be on the virtual coffee break. And the idea with there is really like any conference, any forum you attend, this is where you get the opportunity to talk to colleagues, to talk to peers, to exchange ideas, to ask questions that didn't come up in the session that we'll get the chance to talk to. And Bob and Doug will be moderating those through the day. We'll bring the team back together. We're going to hopefully pull on some of the ideas that come out of Michael's presentation, mix some of the ideas that came yesterday, and really examine together some of the powers of strategic partnerships in our space and how in 25 and hopefully 26 we can make those work for us. We'll come back, as we said earlier on. Annie from Cornerstone is going to take us through some ideas that they're looking at and put some ideas out to you and get your opinion as to how we scale AI in the provision of HR and learning development, and the case study of how that has come together in North America for our relationship with the DTE. So we've got a full morning, full afternoon. Great if you can stay with us. Please keep linked in. Please keep connected to us on YouTube, and we'll make sure that we can engage in the conversation, not only today, but going forward. So I'm hoping that will make sense to you. Hope you can stay with us, and let's move forward without much further ado into the first element, which is Michael. And the technology is working, Michael. We've got you there today. which
Hi
is
there.
super.
Good
Hi,
morning and good afternoon.
good morning to you. Well, I'm going to exit stage left and leave you the floor, Michael, to talk to the guys through your thoughts on leading through change. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Well, hello everyone. I'm Michael Rochelle, and it's a pleasure to join you today and chat through how do we do all this. I know a lot of what was discussed yesterday was kind of filling our minds with the possibilities, the opportunities that we have in order to address the things that we need to address in the coming year. And what I wanted to do today is just spend some time just giving some position on thought of what do I do? What's next? What's the first and step? So I kind of shadowed what Andy had laid out yesterday, the four important areas that he touched on. And I just want to kind of walk through these anecdotes, these ideas, these small mindsets that you can share with your colleagues, and also help you to understand that there's a lot that needs to get done, but there's some basic principles that we need to focus around. So as we discuss the roles-based to skills-based development, one of the things that I talk to with our clients about and people around the world as I speak is the idea that skills-based development needs to be more of an ontology now rather than a taxonomy. And what's meant by that is we oftentimes look at skills as hierarchical. And we oftentimes, without doing this on purpose, we let people understand that every skill needs to start from scratch. You need to learn, they're unrelated, and you just have to learn them, and you have to add it to your repertoire. And that's kind of the taxonomy that we often approach with. The idea here with ontology is to give people the understanding that one skill that they already know could be highly related to the next skill. And that the change that needs to take place to understand that new skill, that gap, may not be quite as big as we thought. And I'm the king of analogies, as the VPS team knows, so I'll give you my great analogy this morning is, if you know how to mow the lawn, it's not a moonshot to figure out how to trim the shrubs. The idea being is if we can have learners understand how to relate skills they already know to new things that they need to learn and acquire, it does two things. One, it provides a lot of confidence that people may be able to go a lot farther with less learning. So it gets back to like what Cornerstone's going to cover later on today, this workforce agility starts with learning agility. If we can close the gaps and have people say, hey, I already know a lot. This is not a big stretch for me to learn the new thing. That's super important. And so that allows us also to economize on learning, both from having to build learning, develop content and deliver it, but also that highly competitive mind share that's taking place within organizations where employees need to know a lot of things, be able to focus on a lot of things. So their time for learning is compressed, and it needs to be potent. It needs to be exactly what they need to get done. The other area is give credit where credit is due. We have a tendency in learning when we're kind of implementing is the idea that everyone's starting from scratch. They know nothing about the subject or very little. You've heard the term one size fits all learning, put everyone on the same starting line. It's time to allow people to say and weigh in on how much they think they already know. And we may be surprised on how much they already know about that particular skill or the orientation towards that particular skill that we need them to learn. And so we have to give credit where credit is due. So it's more of a staggered start. Different people may be starting on different lines. Another analogy I can give you is imagine if we were teaching everyone to use a fire extinguisher. And imagine if you had in that audience everyone that doesn't even know what a fire extinguisher is, to volunteer fire personnel and paid fire personnel. You wouldn't put them all on the same starting line when it comes to talking about how to use a fire extinguisher. So we have to spend more time understanding, testing, assessing, and giving learners the opportunity to step up and say, this is what I already know. And if we agree with them, let's shorten that gap that they have to go through in order to develop that skill. The other is, does everyone need to do it the same way? Well, we all want to have this conformity model. It makes us feel comfortable when we say everyone is learning the same thing and is going to do it the same way. But we need to kind of loosen the grip on that idea. Not everyone needs to do it the same way. They need to be able to show that they can perform within their job. But as we all know, we're different people. We have different approaches to things. And we don't necessarily have to do it the same way. A great example of this is proficiency. We may have people that all need to learn the same skill, but depending on their role, they may need to learn it at a deeper or shallower level, at a greater breadth than others, but they all need to learn the same thing. So we have to leave room for, does everyone need to learn that skill at the exact same proficiency level and do it exact same way? This allows learners, again, to have more confidence in that. They don't have to like pull back the bow and hit the bullseye with the arrow every time. That there's room, there's understanding, there's style, there's approach, without creating a situation where people are saying, you don't know how to do what you're doing. The last is, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. The idea being that if we're really going to understand whether or not someone's learned a skill, you got to let them apply it. And doing it on the job isn't necessarily the very first step. That many people will oftentimes give feedback that I've learned something new, but I really don't want to practice it in a live situation. So this is where we need to spend more time saying, we've got to put them in, got to coach them up, but are there opportunities to learn in a safe environment? Can I apply what I've learned in a safe environment? Can I go through trial and error and get feedback? If that's not possible, can I have an apprenticeship? Can I have that coach or mentor that can be side by side with me as I apply my new learning, my new skills acquisition, and get immediate feedback and feel like I'm supported? As we say, as another analogy, people don't want to learn a new skill and then feel like they're walking the tightrope without a safety net underneath. No one wants to be out there on their own with the idea that if I don't get it right the first time, it could be detrimental to me and the organization. So these are just some tidbits, some anecdotes on how you can take a very heavy subject like roles-based to skills-based development and start with the basics. So let's move on to what Andy talked about next, which is volume to value and performance impact. One of the things that we talk about all the time is learning is no longer the outcome. For many years of being in this industry, it's very apparent to me that we cling very tightly as learning organizations to those activity metrics: completion rates, grades, pass, fail, certifications, progress, hours of training delivered. They're activity metrics, but do they really open the door to and provide insights to the rest of the organization on whether or not we're moving the needle on individual, team, and organizational performance? So we have to kind of rethink what we mean by learning. Learning is not just a straight knowledge transfer, give someone a test, or they tell you they're very satisfied with what they learned. It's really saying, can they apply it in an environment that leads us to that performance impact? And in some cases, before we see a performance change, we oftentimes have to look for a behavioral change. We have to look for that new way of thinking and acting from our learners/employees that then is the lead indicator to eventually they'll perform at a different level. And so it's very important that we begin to understand that performance is our outcome in learning and not just the learning itself. The other is another analogy oftentimes I use when I'm speaking with teams, learning organizations, is the riding a bike is the breakthrough. If you really want to characterize performance, you have to really start with the end state in mind. And Clark, Marino, Willis, and others said this many years ago, that we have to start with the observable, demonstrable effect of the learning. So in other words, what does it look like? And so oftentimes, as an analogy, I'll use riding a bike. I'm sure everyone in the audience, if you were asked to visualize in your mind and then write down on paper the key bullet points that would allow you to say someone can ride a bike properly, you could probably do that very quickly. You could picture someone riding a bike properly. You could articulate what would be as an event that would lead to you thinking they can't ride a bike properly, or they need some more work, or they're on their way but they're not quite there. This is what we need to do with learning in order to be performance oriented. We have to start from the end state and work backwards. So how do we want people to perform? If you had to describe to someone, that person knows that skill, that person knows that new competency, or that person can do that new thing that we're asking them to do. What would that look like? Could you describe that? And more importantly, could that manager provide to you feedback on what they would be looking for, what they would observe on the job to say, yes, that person has mastered that learning. From there, we can work backwards into what are the learning objectives. And sticking with the riding a bike analogy is, we know how to break that down. We know we would look at how they hold the handlebars, how they put their feet on the pedals, their balance, being able to shift gears, being able to pedal properly, being able to keep their balance as they move forward. Can they slow up and brake properly? We can identify the learning objectives that will lead to the observable behavior that we're looking for. Once we identify those learning objectives, then we can build the right mix of learning to ensure that those particular attributes, those particular learning objectives we're looking for, are accomplished. The other is that we have a tendency to create linear learning within organizations. So learning really is a series of loops on a fishing line. And again, using this as an analogy, if everyone pictured like just a long line of fishing line, and imagine if you could tie loops in very specific spacing or intervals in that fishing line. So there's like little loops hanging down. The idea is that's how people learn. What they need to do is be given some of that line in the beginning. So in other words, this is the new learning. But then they have to drop into that loop of being able to assess the learning, absorb the learning, apply the learning, get feedback, course correct, and then show that they know it. And then they go through that first loop, and then they're back up on the original line to learn the next thing. And when they learn the next thing, they drop back into that fishing line loop. We cannot push learning linearly. We can't just continue to give people learning and say, we've tested you, we understand that we think you know it, keep going to the next, It's too much cognitive load. It doesn't leave enough breathing room for people to be able to say, let me assess this, absorb it, try it, tell me what you think, give me feedback, then you can tell me that I mastered it. So we need to build back these very important learning loops as we move learning forward. The one that's probably most sobering to learning organizations when I chat with them is the report card on learning is not filled out by you. We hold on to very closely how we feel about how learning is going. And oftentimes, candidly, learning organizations will be quite defensive and push back very hard on the effort that they've placed in order to deliver learning efficiently and effectively with the time and resource constraints that are within the organization. And they try to prove their effort through all of these activity metrics that we previously discussed. But we have to embrace the idea that we're going to get an A or an F on our learning based on the organization filling out that report card, based on managers saying, I observe the demonstrable impact learning has had on my team's performance or on an individual's performance. And executives of your organization are going to say the overall performance change driven by learning has led us to be able to launch that product successfully, improve our customer satisfaction scores, grow our top and bottom line, mitigate risk, onboard people more quickly. All of those pieces have to link together. So we kind of have to embrace the idea that the return on learning is going to be measured based on what we deliver to the organization. And then, and only then, can we show that learning had a true impact on individual team and organizational performance. So we can't be defensive. We can't feel like we've had a loss of control as learning organizations. What I would take away from this idea is we have to embrace the idea that we have to partner with our business stakeholders in developing what learning will need to be effective. What's talent's role in getting the things done? What do they need to know different, more of, or better? And work together in partnership so that when we deliver the learning, we have the business stakeholders align, engage, and agree with what's being accomplished. That'll also help you to make sure that the momentum of learning continues to maintain what it needs to maintain, that we don't have any stalls or gaps, because the business stakeholders can't really understand what learning is being delivered and why and how that's going to benefit them. So let's continue our discussion. And again, kind of getting to Andy's third bullet point was, established to emerging technology. We've talked a lot about AI the last day or so, and I'm sure there were many conversations within your organization and with your colleagues worldwide long before you joined this forum. But what I'd like to introduce as a simple concept is that AI and HI are the black and white keys. Again, another analogy of picture a piano. There's no way that you could play the proper music without using both the black and white keys on the piano, or at the very least, if you used one or the other, it wouldn't quite sound the same. And so what we have to look at is artificial intelligence needs to be joined with human intelligence in order to work properly. AI is not a replacement strategy for human intelligence. AI requires HI to bring the perception, to bring the understanding, to bring that color, to bring that completeness to the song that we're trying to play. And so you're not out of the running and you're not out of the race. This is an extinction level event, bringing AI into your building for learning, but rather embracing the idea that AI and HI is the only way that this is going to work right. It has to be blended together. We have to use all the keys on the keyboard in order to play the music properly. The other piece that I oftentimes see within organizations is this idea that I'll ask them a simple question. We'll go through an HR process. Let's just say learning, for example. And oftentimes I'll ask an organization when we're working with them and say, why do you do it that way? And they'll say, well, that's the way our particular learning management system works. So we do it that way. So what's lost in that conversation is the idea that we have conformed the way we develop and deliver learning to the technology that we've chosen. This we need to resist. We have to resist this with every fiber of our being. We have to first sit down with great people within our organization and develop the right learning processes. And then technology is there to scale those great processes. So we have to resist that system conformity. We can't just fold learning into the technology and say, well, that's the way we're going to do it. No, I'm sure there are people out there right now saying, hey, I've already got technology that I've picked, and that's what I have to do every day, or I'm not necessarily the person who gets to choose. You know, we get oftentimes told what we're going to use. And so this isn't 100% for organizations, but we have to kind of embrace that idea that learning has to stand on its own 2 feet from a people process standpoint. And technology is there to scale in good or a bad way. If you think about it, technology can oftentimes scale the inadequacies of learning. It can just show everyone in the organization that learning isn't as good as it needs to be. It does not have the ability to regulate the quality of the learning. So if you think about it, technology is at the tail end. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're using technology in a way to foster as best we can and to scale as best we can the best and next practices of learning. So if you do have the opportunity to evaluate your current learning technology, this is the kind of thought process that you need to take place, and not rush to pick a technology and then see how it fits with your learning. The other thing I oftentimes talk about is technology is loud, but is anyone listening? And what I mean by that is many organizations are rushing to, particularly the post-pandemic, to try to bring a lot of technology into the organization to help employees across all areas of HR. And so the impact of that through implementation, change, learning new things, technology is definitely loud. People know that there's a lot of noise going on within their organization in terms of technology. But the key is anyone listening? Are your employees really listening to this technology volume? Are they really embracing the technology that you're rolling out? Does it have a modern look and feel? Does it actually help them to do the personal and professional things that they need to do every day within their organization? And much of the research shows that there's still a fairly big gap between people feeling like the technology that's available to them, particularly in learning, does just that for the employee. Does it help me personally and professionally? Is that the go-to place that when I don't know how to do something or want to remind myself on how to do something or learn a new way of doing something, I run right to that learning technology gateway or portal, and that's where I'm going to learn. And that just isn't there yet. So we may be thinking that we're making a lot of great strides with our learning technology ecosystem augmentations within learning. But we also have to pay very close attention to whether or not the employees are hearing what you're trying to get done and does it resonate with them. The last one is a little bit of tough talk. And this is when we talk oftentimes with organizations that say technology is not to make your job easier. So oftentimes when we're looking at technology selections, for example, we'll see that the requirements for that technology, that learning technology, are heavily skewed towards the administrators and the learning organization itself and how they're going to use it. I.e., how is this going to make my life easier? How is this going to allow me to do more with less? How is this going to help me to scale or track things properly or make sure things go right? And believe it or not, learning technology really needs to be, how does it improve the learner experience? And oftentimes we see that lost in the selection process, that we don't start with what we call a learner first strategy. If you think about it, no one in your organization is going to be upset if it makes your job harder, but it makes the learner experience better. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about. That technology needs to create a learning vision, a sense of engagement, excitement, motivation to learn. Remember, in many organizations, the first interaction with learning is a technological interaction, unless you're sitting in a classroom going through PowerPoint. And so think about it, the entire effort of what you've put together, all that blood, sweat, and tears that you've put in to developing learning and getting it right, hinges on how people feel about the interface to get to that learning. And if they don't have a good experience with that learning gateway, they don't come back. They look for other places to learn. Or you get a bad report card on your technology. So we have to really make sure that when we're assessing technology, whether it's to pick a new one, enhance the one that we have to have a learner first mentality. And even if that learner first mentality leads to more effort behind the scenes than our end, that's the price we need to pay to improve learner engagement and improve the learner experience. So I'm kind of wrapping up on the fourth point that Andy brought up, is this generic to personalization. And it's hard. I mean, we talked about scale yesterday. I brought that up, that everything that we've talked about, if you add the words at scale, makes it much harder. But what are those small things that we can do that are ever so important in order to create personalization in general? So the first is start what's in it for me. It's a little bit about like technology isn't there to make your job easier. Again, the same thing applies for personalization of learning. It would be very hard to sell to an employee that 100% of the learning is coming from what you want them to know is a what's in it for me approach. Many employees now say, I learned too much of what an organization wants me to know, but where is my personal and professional development involved in this learning that you're asking me to acquire? And so we have to kind of take a step back and say, what's in it for the learner? What's going to motivate the learner to learn? We know that we want them to learn certain things, but what's in it for them? Where can we communicate to them that there's a personal and professional development opportunity? Even in the most straightforward and oftentimes dry approach like compliance training, there has to be personal and professional development. The learner has to see the value of learning it for themselves as much as learning it because the organization is asking them to learn it. So we need to spend more time. That's the definition of personal. If I feel like, hey, 50% of this learning I get, the organization needs me to know it, but I can also see where I can advance within the organization, or I can fulfill my personal milestones, dreams, and aspirations in this learning, your learners are going to be much more engaged, much more motivated. Whatever it is that you're trying to get them to learn, they'll do it better and faster. And so we have to kind of create that middle ground. We have to negotiate that middle ground for what's in it for me. The other is don't make it rain. Years ago, I used to have a particular slide that I would put in my presentations that would show the difference between a push and pull strategy with learning. What we oftentimes do is we make it rain within our organizations. We just create a lot of learning up in the sky, and then we open up the clouds and it just rains on our learners. It's just an insurmountable amount of learning that's one directional, not that what's in it for me. And many employees will give feedback saying it's just like it's raining, learning. And so they pull out an umbrella. They try to stop the deluge of one-sided, one-directional learning because they can't absorb it all. They don't understand the need for it all. They don't see how it impacts their personal and professional development or even what they need to do next on the job. So we just can't rain learning on people. We have to have more of a pull strategy, which the idea is instead of making it rain, have people be engaged with what learning is all about. What's the change agenda for learning? Why is it important? How it'll value them as well as value the organization. The best thing that the learning organizations can do is take a field trip down the hallway to the marketing department. We have to market our learning. We have to sell learners on this learning is good. And here's why it's so important for you to know it. We can't just take it at face value anymore. We have to get learners to be attracted to our learning, to be drawn in, to say, I really understand the value of why I need to know this. I really feel good about the fact that. Because remember, we're asking them to do more things than ever. And mind share is at a high rate of competition. And so is time and resource allocation. And so we have to make learning potent. We have to make it count. And the best way to do that is to show that learners and invite learners and communicate with them and sell them on the idea that the time that you're about to put into learning is well worth it. The other idea is it takes a village. The concept being, as Hillary Clinton brought up, it takes a lot of people to get someone to turn out right. It's also true with learners. It does take a village. It does take tribal knowledge. It does take interacting with peers, coaches, mentors, colleagues, people that you trust within an organization. Learning just doesn't happen on a learning management system or in the classroom. We have to create a culture of learning within our organization that builds that village, that allows a learner to be able to learn from everyone within the organization and for others to be able to provide and offer their learning to others. We have to create that community, that village approach, because without that support, we can't take a 4-hour course and stick it in a learner's back pocket and say, pull it out when you need it, when you're about to do something. We need to be able to have this tribal knowledge, this community-based approach to learning. We need to pull down the silos. We need to take down the walls. We need to remove the obstacles within our organizational structure so that people can learn from one another. And we need to embrace those highways that are already there. We can't conform learning. We have to allow it to take on what Eric Hubbard said years ago. We have to allow the hierarchy of an organization to provide knowledge transfer, not the hierarchy of an organization. So think about that the next time, that how can we give access to learning in a way that someone can learn from all of the people around them. And then the last one is pretty straightforward, but it's oftentimes a good reminder, is don't assume everyone loves technology. We have kind of collapsed into the idea that high personalization of learning has a very strong technological component to it. The idea being like, I think it's really personalized if I can learn on my mobile device. It's right there in front of me. I can pull it up, it's intimate, staring at the screen, watch a video, what have you. Or other forms of ways where we're saying we're going to deliver bite-sized learning that's just the right size and perfect timing in the moment, just for me, just in time, just the way I want to learn it. It all sounds great, but with that heavy technological bent that we connect to that in order to precisely hit that target of learning, we're assuming that everyone is digitally dexterous. We're assuming that everyone loves technology. Everyone's completely comfortable with technology, which we know is not true. There's a very big kind of curve and perspective and spectrum within an organization based on how much people embrace technology. And where that's driven is by their personal likes and dislikes. If someone isn't a real fan of technology outside of the work, they're not suddenly going to become a big fan of technology inside of work. We have to embrace that spectrum. And so oftentimes, what I'll mention to learning organizations is that if you really want to personalize learning and you're leaning heavily into a technological solution to deliver personalized learning, don't take for granted how people feel about tech. one of your first training courses you should build is digital dexterity, familiarity with technology. Give people the opportunity to feel more comfortable with technology, to embrace it, to get over the idea that I don't like it, it just gets me really irritated, I get anxious. Because that's going to be the gateway to you being able to deliver this personalized learning. So don't take for granted everyone loves learning. Get out there, get surveys going, talk to people, find out what your curve is, what your spectrum of digital dexterity and love for technology within your organization. Fill in those gaps, and you'll find that this personalization driven through technology will go much better for you. So that's kind of a wrap up of the 4 points that Andy had brought up, and just some of my thoughts and ideas on what are the key areas for carrying that forward, and the what to do next and the so what.
Wow. So thanks a lot, Michael. That's really insightful in that there's so much there. I mean, I thought a lot myself about Andy's presentation last night, and I was really quite encouraged to find so many areas of commonality. But I think the sum up that you've been able to give there really puts into context in terms of the amount of change involved. I like the analogy in terms of establishing learning around taking that transition from what we know into what we might be able to use, but maybe underpinning it with a big understanding of what you're trying to do. Walking the floor, if you like, in the business I used to be involved with. The best automotive dealers were those who could walk the floor, could understand what customers were looking for, and then apply answers to it. I know we've had a lot of questions. That's why I've asked Doug to come on the screen now in the chat. And we're going to take a break and come back to the formal panel in a moment. But I just wanted to capture some of those questions that while they were fresh and people have put them into the chat room. So I'm going to bring Doug in, if I may, and just ask Doug, is there one or two themes that have come out that you'd like to bring from the floor to Michael at this stage?
Yes, so we have some people echoing what Michael has said. So, for example, Maureen has commented, what's in it for me is key to getting the learners engaged and get on board with training. Companies need to get better at the start to ensure learners are engaged and on board with training, especially mandatory training. Explain, for example, why it's mandatory. So not a question as such, but confirming.
Itself, yeah.
And in questions, I have the question, how can I ensure the changes we implement are sustainable over the long term and we don't lose momentum after the initial push?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it kind of dovetails into what I was mentioning while we're having that time together, is the idea that you have to involve the business stakeholders in the organization itself in the beginning. The key is getting their buy-in on how are you going to approach learning, what the objectives of learning is. Because in working many years with big change management initiatives, things stall, or there becomes competitive mind thought. Like someone's going through a big learning process, all of a sudden a big project happens. And what are managers going to do? They're going to say, hey, I don't have time for my team to be doing all of this learning. We got to get this big project done. There are things that are going to come up that potentially can stall learning, potentially move towards derailing it or deprioritizing it. But if you get executive sponsorship in the beginning of how important it is, there's a term I often use around this, which is that's when you can get people to stand tall in the windy gap. You need air cover. You need someone to stand up and say, no, we're not going to sacrifice the learning. We're not going to sacrifice our learning initiatives because these things have happened within the organization. We're going to stay the course. We have to get this done. This is a mandate. This is something that's for not just our short-term, but our long-term future viability as an organization. You can't do that on your own. So it's really key in the beginning. When we run big learning engagements, for example, we start out with what we call an alignment and engagement exercise. Getting buy-in in the beginning is not just to have everyone be able to say, we all agree on what time it is, and now we can start with building learning, but it's to make sure that when learning hits a rough patch, or things happen in your organization that potentially puts pressure on learning moving forward, these are the individuals that are going to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. It's going to remain a priority, and we're going to push forward. So that's the key thing, is executive sponsorship.
Absolutely, getting that ownership of stakeholders at the very top, which will help drive the ownership for the participants across the organisation, I guess. Great. Well, what I'm going to suggest, we captured a lot of those questions now, and we're going to come back and bring it into the panel discussion. Whilst we do that changeover, we're going to invite you all, please, to hang around for our virtual coffee break. We're going to bring on alongside Michael, we're going to bring Annie, who I mentioned before. We're going to bring Andy back. We're going to bring Bob. And we're going to use that opportunity to collate the questions that have come from the floor for Douglas. And also we've got some others as we go through, maybe trying to bring some of the themes together and examine the thought of a strategic partnership and how it can be practically applied. So please stay with us, and we will come back to you at 1:15. So thank you.
Hi everyone, and welcome Bob to our virtual coffee break. We don't have Louise today, so Bob is joining us. Where are you joining us from today, Bob?
I am joining you from a tiny town called Fenton, Michigan, just north of Detroit, where we're experiencing our 4th day this week of wonderful, wonderful winter weather. So
I've heard it's cold. I was talking to Tony earlier, and he was mentioning the weather. So Tony's coming up a bit later to talk about a partnership with DTE. It'd be great to know in the chat if everyone today could tell us where they're from, and we'd love to know where you're listening to us from. I'm here in Barcelona, Spain. So here in Barcelona, Spain, we have our International Service Center. We provide global support for our clients from there. So I'm just looking at the chat. I think people are a little bit shy in the chat today. Don't be shy. Don't hesitate to tell us where you're from. We'd love to know. Were there any key takeaways for you today from Michael's speech, Bob?
Yeah, there's a few. I love the opportunity to talk with folks like Andy and Michael, because their ability to put things into bite-sized nuggets and takeaways, and bring the stories down to or concepts down to a level folks can understand. There's a few takeaways I had in particular. One is that the themes aren't necessarily new. This is something we see time over time, but how we go about addressing them, or the specific challenges posed within these themes, may be unique to the technology that's come along. But I like what Michael said about learning is no longer the outcome, and the change in that area of doing. And we all have a great experience of that. I've never learned how to fix my dishwasher, but I've certainly gone on and I've certainly done some things, with the help of tutorials and whatnot. So the performance so far, has been the outcome. So that was one of the key takeaways for sure. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think that it was interesting to hear about the approach to really marketing the learning better. Was one of the key things. That's actually here in Barcelona. That's one of the key services that we provide for clients, and helping them to better market to our learners. And I think that that's really important to get the buy-in of the learners. One of the key themes, I think, over the last few days has been, of course, the technology. It would be interesting to hear, of course, the main piece of technology in learning at the moment is, of course, the LMS, where most things are centered around. I'd love to hear from any of our participants. If you're in the chat, I know people are away on break, but what would be the key piece of technology in L&D that you use, outside of the LMS. What do you see with your clients, Bob?
Well, I think certainly the LXP and Experience platform, the ability to integrate the different technologies into a cohesive reporting tool is very important. We can talk about discrete technologies like we did with Aeneas Island yesterday and virtual worlds, or VR and AR. But at the end of the day, having that capability to marry things up to a single instance of insight for the organization is absolutely key.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the analytics is really key. People want to really measure the ROI on their learning and look at all the metrics that are important. And I think increasingly as well, systems that can consolidate that information and link up the analysis between platforms or something that we're going to see more. Okay. Let's have a fun question for today. So yesterday we heard about Andy, and he was talking about a visit to the Sagrada Familia. The Sagrada Familia actually see it out the window here in Barcelona. It's the Gaudi's, the famous unfinished church with it's absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen it, make sure you go online to have a look at it. But he was talking about how in his tourist visit he saw a lot of technologies that have that he thinks that would be could be easily applied to L&D. So it's strange, sometimes there's a crossover between industries. What type of, have you seen anything recently that you've thought, wow, that would be a good idea for L&D from somewhere else? It's a little bit of a difficult one.
Chat? Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not a question from the chat. It's a question I've come up with just now.
Okay.
But
okay.
it's one to think of. I mean, I think that I would echo. I've also had a visit to a museum here in Barcelona. I did see some technology which I think could be applied with learning. What Andy was talking about was augmented reality, which is being increasingly used. But also, I think that I recently went on a virtual museum tour of a museum in France that I was interested in. And I know that we're already doing that, but there are a lot of technologies that are being used in other industries that can be applied to learning. Have you seen anything recently?
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time I fly in and out of the DTW, the Detroit airport, right? Even there in the large space, once you pass TSA security, there's actually an XR section in there that Delta, the airline, has set up, where you can choose to enter with your smartphone, and you walk in this grid, and it gives you everything you need to know about the airport and some history, but as well as useful information to find what you're looking for, where you want to be going, where gates are, etc. And that's really, the key thing, right? Whether it's the Gaudi Cathedral or that instance, it's giving the learner, the user, the contextually appropriate information, the things they need to know at that moment, right? And making it personalized. There's not just dumping it on you. It's what do you want to know? It's a pull basis that's on demand in an environment that works.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Especially for example, for new starters. I know for one of our clients, we created a special app which takes them through the entire onboarding and induction journey, and that's something that's really great, where you have all the information in one place. And it's a great example of how technology from somewhere else can be adapted into learning. We'd love to hear from you on the chat as well. I think people are a little bit shy today. We do have a few people from Ireland on the chat. So I've seen Maureen and Colin. Also, I've seen we have Renaud in France as well, in Paris. Too. Yesterday we were talking as well about in Ireland and the UK. We're very fond of having biscuits with our tea, but we know that our American cousins usually like to have coffee more, perhaps. What are the favorite snacks in the US to have with your coffee? Is it cookies, or do you
Oh
prefer
yeah,
a cake, or
yeah.
what's the top thing?
There's cookies, there's tea cakes. The Biscoff type of cookies are, very popular. As well. Or you
Biscoff has
have
become
something.
an international phenomenon. I think I don't know if it's through from TikTok or one of the other social media apps, but I think up to a year or two ago I hadn't heard of it here in Europe, and now you can buy
Okay.
lots of Biscoff products. You can buy like a spread, like for putting bread, and all sorts of different and different ice creams and so on. So they've really made a name for themselves recently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And my experience is through travel, right? I mean, it's most airlines, or at least the ones that I fly, offer those that I never heard of them before I got on a plane. So there's that. Um, One of the things I'm curious about, if folks have an opinion on this, is actually the term artificial intelligence. And we've talked a lot about it this last day, and talking some more about it today. And I contend that one of the greatest things working against AI is its name. If it had been called augmented intelligence, in the terms of how Michael described it, of AI plus HI, that it's working with, it's an augmentation to what the humans can do, instead of artificial, which is something external or feels like it's happening to you. I wonder what how adoption would go, or how the perception would go differently. I think language is very important. Just curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It can be a little scary. Unfortunately, some of the terms that are framed for technology are not always the best, but usually they end up sticking there. I have a couple of comments from the chat. So I've got Yvonne, who's attending from Michigan, so closer to you. And also Sally has mentioned that she's having a donut. Now we forgot about, of course, for in the US, donuts are one of the biggest sweet treats that you have there. But going back to AI, yeah, I think that's a great point, that the augmented would perhaps make it feel a little less scary for people. I think AI perhaps is something that we associate a little bit with sci-fi novels, and because that's probably where it originally appeared from. So yeah, definitely there. We've got about 5 minutes left. So please, if you want to take a break, we're going to have a really great panel discussion coming up now on strategic partnerships. Bob's going to be part of that as well. So if you want to take a last break now, get a cup of coffee, or stretch your legs, or take a comfort break, please do that and come back and join us for the panel discussion. As well, if you have any questions at all for any of the panelists or about any of the themes, please do take the opportunity to ask those questions. We have the chat open. We have, answering your question, Bob, we have Andre, who has said that he thinks that AI has turned into a buzzword, but it needs to be implemented for the correct situation. And we have Yvonne has mentioned some suggestions for an alternative framing of the name: accelerated intelligence, or augmented intelligence, or adaptive insights, or amplified innovation, or actionable intelligence. So all great suggestions there. I think people in LinkedIn are a little more active today than YouTube. Come on, I was Team YouTube
Switched from
yesterday.
yesterday.
Yeah,
I
and
blame
Team
it on
YouTube isn't doing
me.
well.
I'm not Louise, right? So there's an adaptation period that they go through here. Maybe the next cycle.
Yeah,
What it just, as folks are getting themselves together and getting their coffee and donuts and whatnot, just going back to the theme of themes, and learning being persistent over time. One of the things that I really liked that Michael touched on was the idea of alignment, and governance, and alignments and expectations, and that's over my 2+ decades in learning, that's just been one of the biggest, most consistent things that causes projects and programs to fail, is not having that in a way to sustain that over time. And a question came in on the sustainment for Michael at the end there as well, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit in the panel, but such an important factor.
yeah. I think that really is a critical factor. The governance is so important, and getting everyone on board. Yvonne's mentioned humorously that he has used one of the AI tools to create all of the names that you provided to us there. So AI is even looking to rebrand itself.
That's it. I
So
can't trust those names now. Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to probably be cut off in the next minute or so. So it really is the last opportunity for you to go away. If you don't want to miss any of our panel discussion, please get your coffees at the ready, and we'll be rejoining very soon our panel discussion there.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
Very good.
So here.
We're back. Well, we're almost all back anyway. So we're going to take a panel discussion, and for that I've been joined by some people who have made a significant contribution to our forum over the last couple of days, and we'll make more of a contribution as we go through this next period. So I'm going to just let them introduce themselves. Michael is on screen, so hi Michael, you're back with us, thank you. And Bob, Bob, I didn't introduce who you are and what you are early on. Do you just want to tell the team why you're here, apart from to make coffee?
You didn't tell people that we actually met in the chat room, Steve, so there you go. Bob Shostak, I am the Director of Customer Solutions for VPS, and head up our business development operations in the U.S.
Lovely, thank you. And say Michael, the Principal Strategist from Brandon Hall Group. Annie, hello.
Hello.
So who are you and why are you here?
Well, I'm here because you were so gracefully invited me here. But hi, everyone. My name is Annie Bayeux. I am the International Chief Workforce Agility Officer at Cornerstone. And I know that's a mouthful, but I'll be able to explain what that means a little bit later.
So that's it. So that's the carrot. You've got to stay with us and you'll get to know what a workforce agility officer is. So that's super. Welcome on board. And we're going to grill you like the other guys with questions from the floor in a wee minute. And I want to reintroduce, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, reintroduce Andy Lancaster, who was our main speaker yesterday. Hi, Andy.
Hi, good to be back.
And what do you do for
I
say for a living, but I know you.
It's definitely for a living, and it's a vocation as well. We don't just do this because we get paid, because we believe in this stuff. So, I'm Chief Learning Officer at Reimagine People Development Consultancy, and the name is about it. It's rethinking how we do this. I was former head of learning at CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, for 10 years, developing professional development, and author of a couple of books as well. So, great to be with you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming on board. So we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible, as much as you can when you're on an online environment like this. And so please join in with the spirit to which it's intended. It's a case of trying to solicit opinion, encourage debate. And what I'm quite keen to actually understand, we've got an international group here, Are we seeing the same things? Do we come across different aspects, whether it be in mainland Europe, in the Western United States, in the Eastern United States? Are there commonalities in what we're trying to do? And if there are differences, maybe we might want to explain those with the group. And this is one of the reasons we've assembled such a broad group to come together. So we're going to have set the scene and give you guys in the audience something to do. So you have the ability to join in and enter your opinion on a multiple choice set of questions on the Mentimeter. And we'll ask you just to either scan in the screen or follow the link that was used yesterday, actually, so it's continues for yesterday. And answer the following question. In which areas do you use partners to support your L&D operations? And we've picked 7 areas: training needs analysis and consultancy, content development design, provision of learning technologies in general, training administration, training delivery, development of learning strategy, or simply vendor management. I have to say simply vendor management, that's not a phrase in itself, isn't it? But vendor management. So please scan in and your answers, and we'll catch them up on the screen in a minute as we go through the discussion, and hopefully we'll start to see those in due course. Okay, so they'll come back, but let's examine maybe some areas ourselves and see where we see those impressions. And I've pre-prepared some questions on my iPad here, so I'm going to put you all under the spotlight. So you could argue that one area that we might benefit from working with partners is giving us some of the flexibility and scalability that I know you alluded to, Andy, and Michael certainly talked about. So if you're in a position where you're maybe involved in a project or a program, how would you see partner? And I'll pick on you, Andy, in terms of this. How can you see partners helping you scale learning programs in a way that you couldn't do yourself?
Yeah, and that's very pertinent. Obviously, previously I worked for a large organisation. Now I'm working from a small consultancy. So you recognise the dependencies. And I think working in learning and performance support right now is a huge Venn diagram of overlaps, where we have to be very good at lots of different things. And I think on the scalability side, it's in those areas where you need to bring expertise in. So we all have our own particular expertise and our own passions, but the diversity of requirement now for delivery of solutions is really quite significant. So I think I'd be looking to partners to bring that expertise alongside my expertise.
And do you see any particular key trends are coming up? Any areas, or think, oh, it's really a niche area, or is it across the board?
No, I think it's across the board. In one sense, every area we interface with is moving fast right now. So if you look at behavioural psychology, which is really important for us, that whole area has just changed massively with thinking around neuroscience. So I think every area is expanding, particularly technologies, and this is what we've been talking about over the past few days. That's a fast-paced one. And I think, again, speaking to guests who are here, you may be even a singleton learning person in an organisation or with a small team. On technologies, I think we need to leverage the support of great vendors who are thinking about this on a daily basis. So technology definitely, but yeah, I would definitely see in the whole behavioural side, it's really important what we're thinking around that. And even in terms of learning experience design and how we actually design. I did my master's degree in instructional design so many years ago. I still carry my master's degree, but it was a different world then. Yeah. So I think it is about tapping into not only experts, but passionate experts, people who love what they do, and you want to get that energy into your system.
I mean, we talk about scalability. I mean, where do you see scalability? I mean, Cornus is a big organisation.
Absolutely.
Where would you see the benefit of partnership in how you guys work?
Okay, so there's a two-sided question, because when I'm looking at the scalability of partners, obviously, we look at it in two categories, right? When we need hands and when we need minds. And hopefully a lot of that is combined. But when we're talking about very stable processes around implementation services, obviously we need a lot of hands. Our processes are very mature, and we're leaning heavily on our partners to come in and execute for us. Now, you still use a little bit of mind in that, right?
Yeah.
But the real value moving into 2025 and really moving into the future of learning when you're thinking about it, we're thinking also on the lines of expertise, but expertise to create agility, either a moment in time need where we can't ramp up
Yeah.
as well as partners can.
Yep.
But also partners allow us access into different areas where potentially like VPS is speaking with the right customers.
Yep.
You have their ears. So allowing partners to come in and show expertise and show an extended bench strength of Cornerstone is really vital for us.
Yeah. Good. That's interesting. The idea of extending bench strength. I know, Bob, you work with some pretty big organizations. Is that a notion that you recognize in terms of, I like this idea of what was it, minds versus moving?
Hands, yeah.
Yeah.
Mind
It's in
versus
muscle
hand.
and
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah, mind versus hands, yeah.
I like that as well. Yeah,
And-
certainly
and
Steve,
I
is
liked
something
it.
that
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I liked it when Michael, I mean, I loved your analogy, Michael, where you were talking about the piano keys. You need AI and HI, and I guess that is an area of being able to scale pretty quickly.
oh, we can't hear Michael.
Being synonymous with scalability. But I think like anything else, AI can be incredibly precise, very intimate, and used in a very specific use case by an individual within an organization. And I'm sure Andy has experienced that as well, with instructional design. So
Yeah.
it's yes and no when it comes to AI. I think what's important that I was trying to bring up is there's a personal relationship between HI and AI. And again, being the king of analogies, I'll give you an example. The way I look at AI is the difference between handing someone an axe to cut a tree down and handing them a chainsaw. I think what AI is, it can be a very precise tool for just one individual to improve scalability or to improve precision or accuracy or gain a broader perspective more quickly simply by just replacing one tool with another and not necessarily looking at AI in that analogy as being this giant machine I can bring in that can knock down an acre of trees in an hour. So I think we have to be careful about that idea of scalability being synonymous with AI, because I think AI is a very unique technology. Like, we don't walk around with an LMS in our pocket and whip it out when we need it, or an LXP, but you certainly at any time, planes, trains, and automobiles pull out your AI access and do something phenomenal sitting waiting to get on an airplane or grab a taxi.
I like the analogy there, the trains, planes, and automobiles. I mean, Bob, have we seen any limitations in terms of our relationships with partners? Any limitations in scaling?
Sure. I mean, well, the relationship with every organization, partnerships have different forms and flavors, and certainly talked about when we had with the INEOS yesterday, we'll talk about DTE today, but the parameters of the relationships are set up around the needs and the culture of the organization, right? It's our job to be the type of partner that an organization wants, and certainly we want our behaviors and our integrity to be consistent in how we work with folks, regardless of the scope of services or the parameters. But it does look different for every organization. Of the hundreds of folks I can think of, that we've worked with over the past 10 years alone, no two were alike in terms of what they required of us to make a successful program or create a successful outcome.
I think that's fair. I think
one for me, Steve, just very quickly, in doing the research for the last book, if you want to drive innovation, if you want to manage knowledge, if you want to solve problems, all of those things, it's proven are done better in collaboration. We don't do any of these things on our own. And I think in terms of being a small organisation, a consultancy, or we think of some of our guests in organisations, small organisations, if you want to do this stuff well at scale and speed, it has to be with collaboration, and that's with partners like yourselves.
And I wanted to come back to that theme of some of the things we're talking about are very general themes. I mean, maybe Annie, do you see it with some of your customers? Are they applicable in the same way to small organisations, or do you have to think differently when you're dealing with a corporate?
I think it's not about the size of a company, it's more around the maturity of being able to collaborate and work together. What we find is working with smaller organizations, exactly like working with a startup. If you were working with a vendor startup, you have their mind share, you have their attention, you have proximity to decision making and leadership, which creates a lot more flexibility. Where bigger organizations, you might have competing interests. It might be a little bit harder to get the attention on the priorities you're looking for. But the advantage in that part is the scalability, right? It's being able to globally. So I think you need both, right? Because you kind of need that hand holding. I need a trusted partner where I can actually put my thumb on the scale and you'll react very well to that. But I also need the scalability and robustness of a global presence and you know, great brands behind that.
So there's a mix there.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
well,
They've got mentoring.
in the interest of flexibility, we're going to take a look back now at what the audience has told us on the Mentimeter result. And let's have a look at this.
Okay, that's
I think the first lesson is I need new specs.
Exactly, me too.
But let's just run through. So in the areas, the 7 areas on the screen. So first, if we go to, as we look at it, and I presume as the audience looks at it as well, the left-hand side of the screen, we've got training needs, analysis, and consultancy. So you know, sort of 55 distinct entries, but about halfway house there in terms of that. A lot of people using partners, the majority of people using partners for content development and design.
That's surprising.
A lot of people using partners for learning tech, which we've touched on. Training administration, the second highest. Delivery, I mean, in our world, we work a lot with delivery partners because there are specialized areas we're working on. And it may be that whilst you have a generic delivery skill for a particular product or brand, there may be niche things that are done infrequently where you would go to a specialized partner for support. Learning strategy, I'll come back to that in a sec, and vendor management fairly low as well. But maybe if we look at learning strategy, if you're working with a customer and learning strategy, is it a surprise to you that people see that as a lower need?
Yes, all of these responses are a little bit surprising. I expected learning technologies to be number one just because the landscape is so, you know, it stayed stable with, for example, the only learning technology most people had was maybe an authoring tool and their LMS, and that was very stable and mature, so you need to manage services a lot more. But where I see right now the velocity of new types of learning products, we mentioned the LXP, there's, you know, this whole gamut of products where I feel like that's where they need a lot of advice. And strategy also, because learning is going through an upheaval, I would say. We've actually changed from just delivering training to trying to be a value creator within the business, and that transition takes upskilling of the roles of learning, and this is where that kind of strategic partner will really play a really nice hand as your learning team is evolving into the next phase of the future of learning.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. The guys
Steve,
online,
Steve, if I could.
please.
Yeah, if I could, Steve. You know, it's interesting how these are grouped with the majority being on the left-hand side there, because all of those are somewhat related with learning technology. If you think about the tools that you use perhaps to do analysis, content design, development, administration, delivery, all these things use learning technology to some degree. So there may be some degree of, you know, confusion or overlap within those. And content design and development is certainly something I've seen as a high-ranking priority or use case and other surveys as well. But the one I want to touch on is what you talked about a little bit or hinted at in terms of learning strategy, because that's something that organizations tend to hold close, right? Folks don't want to give away their strategies. It's something that's very personal to them. And at the same time, it's an area that I think is underutilized in terms of the skills and experience of partners that have seen so many different cycles and so many different use cases that we could bring our experience to bear with organizations to help supply those lessons learned, perspective, what we've seen work that's similar, dissimilar, in very similar circumstances to what a specific organization is trying to do. It's just a great opportunity to take advantage of organizations that have been through so many more cycles than a single organization is able to have on their own.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that you and I picked up in a separate conversation with Michael. I don't know, Michael, when you pulled together the piece on partnership that Bob and I did with you, which I must say was in my mind when we pulled this session together. I mean, given that what you learned through your own studies, did these results surprise you at all?
Actually, they don't, but from this perspective, one is doing learning strategy first. Our research shows, and all the work that we do worldwide on learning strategy engagements, is only 1 out of 10 organizations statistically have a formal learning strategy, and only 10% of that 10% review it regularly. So it's not a surprise that it's a 1. Most people are doing what we call learning execution, without a set strategy. A lot of activities going on, a lot of initiatives, but not something formally put together. And that goes from the Fortune 10 on down. I think the 3 big bars, I think it's difficult now to separate those into their own category without having technology as a background bar. Like even content development and delivery is very heavily technologically based. I think the days of saying content development is over here, like we're a group of instructional designers cranking stuff out, or we're going to send it to some content shop, it's not separated anymore from technology. I think AI has blurred the lines on a lot of those. And also, even on the training, delivery, and administration side, there are providers now that are offering a new category called learning ops, where they're actually offering technology to drive like training administration, down the budgets, accessibility. Where in the old days, at least I'll speak for myself being an old guy, is we used to rely on the LMS for training administration. That's where we knew who had the slide projector, what rooms were available. That was old school, 30 years ago. But now I think there's a technological answer theoretically to almost every one of those bars. And so I think we have to begin to kind of rethink, what are we trying to say when we put statistics out with that overarching theme that, within learning, technology penetrates just about every decision or lack of decision. So that's just, my 2 cents.
No, that's
Do you want to add some nuance?
I was just going to throw one quick thing in. On training strategy or learning strategy, I think sometimes we do a very inward look on strategy, which might be low there. But for me, one of the partnership and collaborative opportunities for organizations is benchmarking. And that's why you would collaborate, because often we've got these huge blind spots around what we're doing. So I'd want to pitch in there. It's quite low, and I think Michael's got a good steer on that one. But I think we ought to be considering how do we benchmark, work with other partners to reveal the blind spots in our strategy. So I just want to pitch in for benchmarking.
Yeah, and I felt, I didn't introduce myself. My background when we first came in, but my former life is also CLO, and I was the CLO at Dannon, the little yogurt company of about 100,000 people globally. And I really feel that you're exactly on point with that, because one of the biggest roles, and maybe this is where they're not consulting with partners, they're consulting with each other. Yeah. I haven't seen one country, and I've been working in Europe for the last 20 years, every country has some kind of national L&D group, whether it's informal or very formal, like it is here in the UK, thanks to a lot of groups like LPI. Now, what we're seeing is they benchmark
Yep.
between themselves all the time. They always want to know what good looks like. So that's a great point. And I think maybe that's why they're not hiring as much learning consultants, is because they're learning off of each other.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is,
And I think
Yeah.
you probably had
So
it.
just-
You probably had it within fast-paced markets. There, I worked in health and social care. We used to benchmark very specifically to see what others were doing as well. So
absolutely.
yeah.
And we got a point as well from the guys.
Yeah, so,
Bob, you
you
go
know,
first.
Annie, I was just looking at that chart in terms of your analogy or reference to minds and hands, right? And when we look at that, I see a lot of hands on that chart.
Okay.
And typically where you'd see augmentation versus mind, taking someone's mind and experience and whatnot, a little bit lower on the end of partnership and across those categories. It just kind of struck me looking at that in the context of what you put out there.
That's a great point. And I also called out the two that I thought was going to be there that were really focused on minds. So that's a great point.
So, okay, well, I'm going to try and drill that down a wee bit. We talked in general about the notion of partnership, about engaging with the right people and maybe against the background of being flexible and scalable. But I'm going to try and challenge us, because I know it's always sometimes a little bit difficult to do this, but why not? We're here. And look at the area of expertise and best practice. And in particular, so the teams there talked about areas they may be looking or agreeing with areas they looked at partnership. And I think I would agree with you. I was a little bit surprised on why looking forward people would not be so open to partnership in terms of strategy. But I totally get the idea that companies are inward looking and there's a very small number of companies, very small percentage of companies who do that. But if we are going to look out and work with partnership, do we have any specific examples that we could talk to the team about that actually say, yeah, that's worked? Where have I got genuine expertise in when I have looked for partnership? Any well, name names if you wish, but any ideas that where we've gone and benefited from partnership? I'm looking at. I know it's a tricky question. But do you want to start?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Do you see how excited I am about that one?
Yeah. Why did he invite me? Yeah.
No, no. The reason why I'm saying okay, because I'm going to start to sound like a broken record, but I think in transition periods where we are shifting strategies, and we don't necessarily have the bench strength in minds to be able to execute that strategy, or to even understand and draw that strategy, or something as simple as a tactical plan, sometimes you're not going to have those resources internally. And I think that when we're making these kinds of pivots, whether or not it's to support the business in a business pivot or just, simple expansion, when you're looking at that, you're going to need people in the organization, and a lot of people have never done this before. It's their first time. And that's where I feel like you have the most bang for your buck, if I can use an American expression, because of that, because it's such a critical need. You have a talent shortage in the skills that you're needing to commit that, and that's you're literally just buying skills because the supply and demand of skills, or the needed skills for that very important pivot, isn't there. And I think that's where I see a lot of added value.
I would agree with you. In our own instance, I can think of a couple of examples where we're working in the UK as part of a broader team, actively as partners within a consortia. And the challenge that we're facing within a new environment for all of the members of the consortia, we're working in the defence environment, the government environment, and all companies in our consortia have worked individually in part. The vision of the customer that we have was to really change from the bottom up and look at a transformative program. I can't even say it now, but transformative program. And I think each of the partner groups, the customer had the foresight to say, look, we've got a big opportunity here. Each of the partner groups were excited by what they could do, but I think very early in the process recognized that they couldn't do everything. And that process of looking outside, finding roles within the team, and much like a sports team, you know, who's going to play in the attacking role, who's going to play in the defensive role, and actually understanding the boundary to work with has started to give real value to this particular customer. Tremendous lessons in home. You know, you go back to the idea of norming, storming, performing, which is an adage we talked about in change management years ago. But the process that the group has been through has meant that we've actually come now, as we've gone through the initial stages of this engagement, which is a long-term engagement, in a position that we now know our strengths, or we recognize our strengths, or we acknowledge our strengths, and most importantly, we acknowledge the strengths of our partners.
Very good.
And in this particular group, we bring expertise in learning, design, and development. The other groups are bringing expertise in people and vendor management and large-scale engagement of people. Other people are bringing areas of property engagement and property management, which individually to members of the team were terrifying, but together are starting to form a cohesive unit. And we've seen that in this particular, and it's been a fantastic learning experience for us as a provider, as well as hopefully for the recipient.
I think for me, in a slightly different role now, I tend to get brought in to provide expertise around particular areas. So I've done the heavy lifting on social learning communities. So I think it is exactly that. We can't be masters of everything anymore. It's just too broad.
Yeah.
So I think you're looking for those sweet spots where someone else can get you up to speed and can bring that. So I think we all need to dig deeper in our own specialisms in order to provide a foundation where we can then provide those collaborative opportunities.
I recognise that. And Bob, I apologise. We cut across you.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, technology is fun, right? You know, one of the, you know, Steve, I think you provide a great example with the consortium, right? Because the consortium starts with a network and choosing people within your network to work within. And the reality is for us as learning professionals, there's 24/7 networks out there that are virtual. You know, you think about your LinkedIn network and the groups that are on there where you pose questions and get advice, and then you down select who you know, naturally you down select who you want to continue and carry on those conversations with. That's also part of partnering. That's how partnership is born. And that's actually one of the reasons we put this type of forum together, was to bring folks together to connect with each other, not just with us. So it's, you know, it's 24/7 all around us where we can get that type of, you know, selection to begin with.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Bob. It's that idea of networking, and maybe that networking idea we can explore on the next slide, which I'm going to make a very tenuous link because of my technological background, Bob. Networking in technology. There you go. Computer networks. There you go. I'm firing now. I'm on all cylinders. But I think partnership, especially the I mean, we're going to talk about it a lot in your session, and I don't want to cut across it too much on this slide, Annie, but it's that notion that out there's this whole world and it's expanding, and we can use these tools to help us, but we shouldn't get, I think, at the point that Michael talked about in his keynote, we shouldn't start to use technology as the reason thinking we could do our job better. We've actually got to step back and think about why we're using it.
Absolutely.
But we've seen it. I mean, the type of technology we've used as a company in training delivery, for example, it didn't strike me as being so long ago. We were probably masters of most technologies because they were fairly easy to master and were established. The explosion in new technology since the COVID time in particular has really meant, you know, it's bewildering. But the key is actually, as we're finding out with this consortium, know the people who know. I think is a great thing, and getting that access to the right technology through partnership groups, and that's taken a change in mindset. We you know, we've worked with people who think, oh no, we do everything in house and we handle this, but soon start to realise the advantages in terms of speed, agility, and engagement of learners.
Don't you feel that that's a little bit? It's cyclical. I remember, so I've been, I'm going to age myself a little bit, in corporate life at Global 2000 organizations for about 20 years. And I have seen waves of outsourcing, and that was because we're looking for operational efficiency. That was the most important thing. There was a lot of stability in the market, and so there was a lot of companies wanting that. Then it kind of bounced back in the 2010. insourcing was a new word, right? And everybody said, okay, let's take these vendors, let's see the best of the best, let's bring them back into the organization. And now I'm feeling after the pandemic is, oh, we need agility all of a sudden. We need to turn on a dime. So now that kind of managed services, it's like, well, we can outsource, but we needed more added value, so let's turn to managed services. And so I feel like that's kind of the trend after COVID, to create that organizational flexibility within larger companies. And it's a smart move.
I think, in terms of organizational design, definitely. And we've used the phrase previously, we look for the best athlete. And again, maybe the sport analogy, the managed services bringing the right skill set together.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on and look at another area which we pulled out in terms of not only just access to technology, but an access to a broad range of vendors, which we touched on already. Knowing which vendors to go where. Traditionally, we may have just gone to delivery vendors in the past. We may have gone to content houses as well. And there has been an explosion in the provision of content for a variety of different areas. But as we get to be more efficient, and maybe we'll explore with you with yourselves, it's picking the right content to do the right job. Annie's company and our company are working on a very innovative program where we're trying to move away from the notion of a provision of learning into the provision of cultivation of talent and career development, using the right content at the right time.
Very good.
And that requires a tremendous understanding of a broad range of vendors to select the right people, to have people all work pulling in the same direction as well. But it's possible. You look at some of the great infrastructure projects that are currently, in all of our countries, take place, pulling people together with different skill sets in different areas. And there's no reason why that can't exist in the provision of learning and development services in terms of the right vendors.
Absolutely.
I mean, Bob, I'm going to test your mathematics now, but maybe I won't hold you to be accurate. How many vendors would a company such as ours engage with in provision of services, compared to, say, the number of customers we have?
I would say, Steve, it's well more of a one-to-one ratio.
Yeah.
Of the vendor partners that we use to provide solutions. Absolutely, it's beyond that.
And and it's been key to how the business has changed in recent times. I mean, Andy, you've seen a lot of different companies. If you're looking at an expanded range of vendors to help your approach to fulfill a partnership type of philosophy, are there particular things you look for when you're looking to expand your own vendor base? I mean, maybe the group on the call now is sitting there thinking, well, it's all very well talking about partners and vendors, but where do I start?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a real question around what your core team is going to look like now. If we're looking from the learning team perspective, I think, I grew very much where we were generalists and we all tried to develop everything. So I think in looking, one thing we've been looking at is the roles that are beginning to appear around development and performance support. They are significant. There's names appearing on job descriptions we would never have thought of happening. So I would go back, for guest styling in, I think you've got to ask what's the core provision that you're going to hold and where you're going to go for the expertise. And it probably is a real challenge to all of us as well, that I think we need to all have a drive area of expertise in our own practice that we can add to that kind of mix. So I would go, what's the core provision? And then I think, obviously, just with VPS, you've proven here that you need a whole range of people. I think that just sparks so much creativity and thinking. So I'd start with my core. And to say, when I first started, we were talking about trainers, learning administrators, learning tech, and a manager. Whereas now, we're asking all sorts of things. So what's your irreducible core, and then how are you going to bolt on these expertise around you?
I guess we saw that a little bit with Louisa's presentation yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
Her customer sat down with her and said, we got 100 and something different roles out across the organisation. The project that she presented is now working with 11 core roles, and then the add-on.
Very good.
And the fundamental parts of that business. But I love your analogy about not knowing, for training for roles that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And I was driving home last night, and like a lot of us, very interested in what's happening politically at the moment. And I was listening to a discussion about Stargate, which is, sounds like that is to quote the vernacular, the mother of all partnership projects, bringing such a disparate group together should it prove to be successful. But the lady giving the discussion, and maybe I thought of you with this, Annie, was she was taught the discussion, and she was introduced and talked about the need for human intervention as well as AI intervention in such a project and speculating. But her job title was fantastic. She was described as an AI evangelist.
Hey, there we go.
And I thought, wow, when I grow up, I could be an AI evangelist too. But not knowing what we're doing and planning for that future is key with any vendor base that we have. So let's move forward, and maybe I'll sorry, Bob.
Well, I was going to say just before I move forward, I'd love to get Michael's perspective on this, right? Because it's not just an expanded range; it's an exploded range, right? I mean, I've done research based on available information that says in the last 5 years, because of the explosion in technology and niche offerings, the vendor landscape has expanded by 300% in terms of the number of companies that are actually offering services. So it's a massively expanded range of vendors, and how you go about choosing partners is important. And Michael, I was hoping that might spark something for you to comment on.
Yeah, we've done over 10,000 engagements worldwide that involve tech. And I can tell you that it's an overwhelming number of choices. I mean, just for this environment, we cover all of HR, but there are actually 1,200 active learning and training solutions available worldwide. And just think about it, when we used to run big HR teams, it was overwhelming years ago. But now you're trying to sort through in limited time and budget, who do I pick? And then there's another underlying issue too, which I can't necessarily say it's pro-provider, but it is what it is that many organizations are looking to have less providers. They found that they expanded. I call it the Big Bang Theory. Like we go through these contractions. I'm in my 5th decade of dealing with this. And, being a former head of IT as well, we see these expansions to providers. Like you'll get this, like, we got to go get a bunch of providers. Then kind of like the Big Bang, it reaches its terminal velocity and then it collapses in on itself. And then you get the range of like, we have too many providers. We're back in that contraction stage again, where people are saying we can't have 5 authoring tools in the building. I mean, to add to the statistics, our statistics show that the average, Fortune 500 company can have on average 6 LMSs in the building. And I've worked personally with organizations that had 17 to 20, believe it or not. So you've had technology for the sake of technology. But I think going forward from a partnership standpoint with providers, I think people are looking for quality over quantity. I think they're looking for, can I get the most out of one provider, like Cornerstone being a great example of it. It would be pretty difficult to have Cornerstone not be in the money on a technology platform for learning and talent, which is great. But there are still just as many companies out there that are using Cornerstone and using 17 other people in the building at the same time. So it's a two-front problem. We have too much within our building, and then there's too much to look at. So in an information economy that's driven by the internet now, we see many organizations doing elimination exercises rather than inclusion. They're looking to say, I don't think you're relevant. I'm going to give you a hyper-specific use case. And if you can't answer that, I'm moving on because I don't have time to infer or figure out whether you can do it or not. The other piece, too, that's putting a lot of pressure on provider partnerships is overwhelmingly, and I'm involved in a lot of sales discussions with providers, just as a third-party neutral, someone to bounce off of, is people think a lot of providers look the same. It's very difficult to differentiate. And the reason for that is, ironically, it has nothing to do with the provider. It has to do with a very poor selection process internally that doesn't get to that 5 or 10% that differentiates one provider. Because if there were just plain too many providers and they all did the same, there's this thing called economic Darwinism that would reduce the number of people that actually can operate. They'd go bankrupt or not be part of the setting. So I think there's a lot of work. I think the great thing that people are looking for, and we see it in our research, and it's been top of the list now for the last 2 or 3 years, before 32 years of looking at research with our firm, is the fact that finding a great partner now trumps any form of functionality need from a provider. And I think the pandemic has driven that. If I can't find someone I can work with that have like cultures, that I like the people, that I don't see turnover in my contacts, that they're there through thick and thin, that they're providing guidance, tough times, like a marriage, someone who's sitting next to me in the room when it happens and is willing to take that body blow with me. The other side to that is, unfortunately, there's been a banner year since 2020 of business process outsourcing of learning. Many organizations have had entire learning departments outsourced, if not significant pieces, to providers, which wasn't necessarily asked in that chart of what do you use providers for, because that's the dark web side of that stat list that you had. But the idea being that we're facing the need for providers as partners. And we may be forced to work with providers. It's not always a voluntary exercise. So if I'm a provider, most importantly, if I'm someone in this audience, like, are these the people that you can work with that are going to be there for the long term? Because one of the things that's terrible is to have a revolving door in churn rate. The churn rate, statistically, for providers within the learning space averages in the 40%. So that's the divorce rate. That means the unhappiness rate is even bigger. Why? Because we're not doing a great job of picking people for the long term. So we've got to make sure that when we approach these providers that are working really hard and we're asking them to be partner, you got to be transparent about what you need and what you're expecting. And I just don't think that as buyers we do a good enough job with that. Got to kind of tear down the RFP process, got to get to know people, got to put the information out there, and let providers really stand on their own merits as whether or not they can help you. Yeah. And so this number of providers to pick from is really not the problem. It's how we approach the selection process in the first place.
Well said. Absolutely. No, well said. Well said. So I'm just going to pull back from that and think about the provision providers. I mean, one of the other advantages that we see is the global reach. You can get to markets that perhaps you shouldn't easily do, and that was another area of exploration that we had on the slide deck to look forward. But global reach is one thing. Understanding what you're looking for, I think, is really eloquently covered in the last answer there. So I'm gonna pull back now and conscious that we want to move. We keep telling people that Annie's going to make a great presentation. We're going to give her the opportunity to make a great presentation. In closing, I'm going to, firstly, because I'll forget to do it at the end, say a big thank you to each and every one of the panel members. And I really do appreciate their input. Before they go, though, I'm going to ask them, because I'm like that, and I can, as a chairperson, ask them for one final thought. Maybe in 1 or 2 words, sum up why you believe getting into strategic partnership is something to seriously consider in 2025. Start with you, Bob.
Of course you will. You know, Steve, I think it goes back to, this is more than 1 or 2 words already, but working with someone that can help an organization with alignment and expectations that Michael talked about in his presentation. It all starts with the strategy, having someone to work with up front to put your initiatives into a structure for governance, execution, and sustainment is very important.
Thank you. Michael, can you add anything to that?
I'll stick with 2 words: ensure success. You can't be successful on your own.
See, Bob,
You can't be successful on your own. You need help.
That's why Michael's Michael and not me. Yeah.
Need help, ensure success. Brilliant.
You have to.
Yeah, thank you. Andy.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a quote from John Archibald Wheeler: "As the island of knowledge grows, so does our shores of ignorance. Therefore, we just need other people around us."
Okay, well, that's not 2 words, Andy.
Yeah, poetry, but not 2 words.
Next time it needs to be a haiku.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
Yeah, there you go.
this sounds like a cop-out because of my title, but I'm going to say workforce agility.
I love it. It's a segue to the next
Love it.
presentation. Okay. Well, thank you, guys. Thanks for staying with us. I really hope that that was of interest to the audience. We're going to move into the virtual coffee area. Bob still has to keep working for his coffee. I'm going to say thanks and goodbye to Michael. I think you may be able to join us at the very end. So hopefully see you back.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I would like to say one thing. I think it's been a real privilege to be on stage with all of the experts, and I really appreciate their insights. I think that what you've done as a group here, along with the folks that joined yesterday, and particularly the insights that Andy laid out, that laid the platform for me, is that I think this is the best that I'm hearing out there to help individuals. And that's why I'm so proud to be part of this.
Great.
That we need more forums like this to answer the tough questions, to be transparent about how we help people. And I think it's been a great opportunity to do that, so thank you.
No, lovely. Thank you.
Agreed.
Do appreciate that. And I know from the feedback we're getting from the teams that we're getting some great insights. So we're going to take a couple of minutes. We're going to come back at 1:15. We're going to put Annie on stage. And we'll catch you all on the other side. Thank you again. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well done.
All right.
To all of our viewers. Just like to do a little plug again. If you're watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as well, if you're on LinkedIn, don't forget to follow us. And we have a newsletter as well that you can subscribe to keep informed to all of the events and great thought leadership pieces that we have like this. So please do, if you want to know what's happening, you need to keep in touch with us. So Bob, great conversation there. What were your key takeaways from the conversation?
My key takeaways are things are a matter of perspective. I think there is some consistencies again throughout the conversation. But the end of the day, it's what works for your organization and the specific things and outcomes that you're looking for. What I really found interesting was the Mentimeter poll, Douglas, and just curious if folks had a reaction to that about how it came out. I know we asked the panelists, but what really struck me at the end was kind of that differentiation between, minds and hands, that Andy touched on. I was just curious if anybody else was surprised or if that kind of met expectations for folks.
Well, our viewers are a little bit shyer today, or I guess that they don't have as many questions as yesterday. I know that people are definitely interested in what we're talking about because I can see the viewers creeping up and down, logging in and out of the various sessions. And for example, our video of yesterday, if you missed yesterday, by the way, the videos are both available on YouTube and LinkedIn, the recordings already. And I've seen that we already have a lot of views of those, so even people who've missed them, you are able to catch up with those later. Of course, we do like you to attend live, and then if you have any questions, you can raise those immediately with us, and we can get those to the panel. This will most likely be we will have more events this year, so as I say, you do need to keep connected to find out about those. And if you have any questions at all, we always welcome questions in LinkedIn. Don't hesitate to send us a direct message in LinkedIn and ask us any questions. And we can sometimes either answer those ourselves or we can provide those for our speakers when we have events like this. So outside of
Well, I was just going to say, Douglas, from your perspective, right? You sit in Barcelona, in our global service center, servicing a lot of different clients that come through there. I was just curious on your perspective in terms of partnership and the organizations that we work with through the service center. What you see in terms of commonalities or maybe even some stark differences.
I think that we see a lot of the same challenges across all of our clients. So one of the challenges, for example, that we see across our clients is really making the most of their LMS. So we've seen yesterday that Total is a partner of ours and Cornerstone is a partner of ours. So really at all levels in our organization, we have experts who can work to help you make the most of that, and that can be something more technological, but it can also be on simpler things like maximizing the use of the LMS. What Michael was talking about of doing better marketing of courses. It's really important to take advantage of the features of your LMS to make sure that your learners are getting the notifications, they're getting the information that they need. Learners today increasingly expect something that's more akin to like a Netflix type experience, where they can go on and be recommended the learning that they need. That doesn't just happen if you buy a platform. That doesn't just happen naturally. You need somebody who has expertise to help you to configure that. And that also goes back to what we were saying with the looking at providing the expertise, and that's something that we can really help with, and that's something I think we have in common across all of the organizations that we work with here in Barcelona. And of course, I think the other thing that I see in common across all of our clients is the administration that comes behind learning is often a bit like Amazon. So when you buy something from Amazon, you don't think about all of the things that happen behind. You go on because you have a great experience, you buy the product, and it turns up at your door the next day. But there's a lot of different things that have to happen so that you have that great experience, trouble-free experience for that to occur. So we really try to make for all of the clients and all of the organizations we work with are really committed to providing a very high quality learner experience so that it's really seamless behind the scenes and you really get the learner experiences learning in a positive way without having to worry so much about all of those details that have to happen around the learning. So yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So on a less serious question, and I'd love to hear from our YouTube attendees and also our LinkedIn attendees. What do you like to do? What are your hobbies when it gets to the end of the week and after a hard week in L&D? How do you like to spend your free time? Bob, what about you?
I am going to give the most boring answer out of anybody that's going to be in this chat room today, because a lot of my time is split between two things. I love to read. I make it a point to read about 52 books a year, and like real books, all in your hand, physical things.
Yep.
So yeah, showing my age there. You can still find those from time to time. And the other thing is I spend about 10 to 12 hours a week in service projects in my community as well through different organizations that I belong to. So those two things keep me keep me pretty busy. I'm an empty nester now, so you got to find other things to do with your time.
Yeah. Oh, well, they say that reading feeds the mind. I also like to read as well. And in my case, here in Barcelona, it's a part of a region in Spain called Catalonia. And Catalonia really has so many nice things to offer. Just a short drive away, within an hour from Barcelona, and maybe an hour and a half, you can be in the ski slopes if you want to be, or you can visit a monastery somewhere, or you can go to a vineyard, or there's 100 different plans that you can do around Barcelona. So you've a couple of plans for every weekend of the year, and that's one of the reasons I really like to live in Spain. I think that people probably are getting ready to come back. I haven't had many comments come in at the moment. I do see that Anna Kevin has mentioned that she likes golf, a great hobby, and haven't got any more at the moment. But we do have a couple of minutes left, so if you want to use this couple of minutes before we get into our next presentation with Annie, which is scaling AI in HR. Please do take the time to get yourself a coffee or take your comfort break so you can get back. I've had a sneak preview of that presentation. It's really interesting and really great, so something that you're going to want to see. And to remind you, if you have any questions throughout the day, pop them into the chat. If we don't get to them during the day, we will be reviewing all of the comments from the 2 days to make sure that we haven't missed anything, and we'll try to get back to you on that. And of course, as I mentioned, if you have any questions at any time, you don't have to wait for an event like this. We will always come back to you if you send us an email. Now, I've seen that we also have Brian in the YouTube chat, who's mentioned that he likes reading, writing, and music production. I think that Steve is also very much into music production. I believe he plays in a band at the weekends. Sometimes in calls, I've seen him with guitars hanging up in the wall in the background. So the interesting hobbies from our viewers. So we've got about 1 minute left before we pop back in. So we're probably going to be cut off very shortly. Bob, we just need to get ready. Everyone get their cups of coffee at the ready to pop back into the chat. This will be the last virtual coffee break. So thank you very much, Bob, for supporting today. And thank you very much for participating in all the virtual coffee breaks to all of you viewers as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you on virtual coffees on our next events. Please do stick around for the next presentation and also our great sum up and our presentation with our customer partnership with DTE in the energy sector. Okay, so we'll be going back at any moment now.
Any moment.
Hello, it's good to see you again. So we're back in the room. As we talked about earlier, I'm pleased to be joined by Annie Bayou, Workforce Agility
Officer,
Workforce Agility Officer at Cornerstone. And Cornerstone and VPS work together on a number of key projects in partnership in the way that we discussed in the last section. So I'm going to hand you over to Annie, and she's got a really interesting insight in terms of how we've talked about AI, but how Cornerstone is seeing AI very much in the workplace as we sit here at the start of 2025. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And for those of you who were not in the panelist session, I just give a quick introduction of myself. My name is Annie Bayou. I am the Chief Workforce Agility. Is it? No, sorry. I think we're advancing our backgrounds just a little too rapidly. Yeah. And I am Cornerstone's Chief International Workforce Agility Officer. And it's just a fancy title to say that I'm working with a lot of key clients on how to integrate a skills-based operating model into their organization, or skills-based organizations, it's a buzzword today, and to create better workforce agility, along with their renewed strategy around Galaxy. So today, I want to talk to you about scaling AI. And when we say scale AI, it really is about scaling AI culture. And what is HR, and more specifically, L&D's role within that. So you guys can see this provocative title right in front of me. AI took my job. And I'm going to just talk about the elephant in the room that probably most working humans are thinking about. And that's the elephant in the room is, will AI take my job? And no wonder they would ask that kind of question with headlines that you might see that look just like this. BT to cut 55,000 jobs and to replace a fifth of those with AI. So every day we're seeing headlines like that. And to be honest, we're not here, and I am definitely not here to talk to you about whether or not AI is actually going to take your job. I don't know. And every report that's coming out is really about this acceleration. Now we're hearing maybe, in 5 years we're going to be getting some kind of singularity, or we're going to have AGI, general AI, come up. All of these predictions mean nothing today. So when I'm trying to predict whether or not AI is going to take your job, I won't know. However, what I can tell moving forward is AI is not going to particularly, today I'm here to talk about whether or not AI can take your job to the next level. And so if you weren't familiar with the Fiverr ad, that's the real Fiverr ad. AI took my job to the next level. So how do you do that? I'm going to talk about scale. I'm going to talk about what's HR and L&D's role in that. So getting straight to the topic, before we talk about how you can scale an AI culture, I want to talk a little bit about the learning trends that are happening, that are going to influence whether or not you're going to be able to understand these different elements that are embedded into it together with AI. So just very, very quickly, before we think about, what you guys aren't seeing is that I'm a bit confused with the slides. So technology, as we see, is always human-driven, and sometimes I'm being silly about it. But so just looking at the different specific trends within AI, within the L&D ecosystem today, what you'll see is the first trend is really like everything, everywhere, all at once, AI. AI seems everywhere. It's in the media. Everybody's talking about it. And rightly so. The difference between what we see in AI today and regular digital transformation that we've actually known for about 20 years is the acceleration piece. So the difference between, just regular transformation, like digital transformation, and disruption is the velocity. And so the velocity of AI and how that's impacting it is going just a little too fast, and it's causing this great disruption within the workforce. And so this is one of the angles that we have to think about for this year. It is everywhere, and it will continue to be everywhere. But what does that mean for L&D? That means that L&D actually is going to be a little bit more, absolutely. It's going to be more adaptive because AI and the technology and that speed is going to allow you to do that. The next trend that we're seeing is that the worlds are merging. This is also another technology-driven trend. And what I mean by the worlds are merging, what we see is not only in the era of AI, we're seeing the era of virtual and virtual worlds, whether it's augmented reality, whether it's mixed reality, or completely virtual worlds. We see that bleeding over and mixing into society and the way we work. I remember maybe 12 years ago, Google Glass came out with the Google Glass. class, it could do nothing. It was it wasn't a failure of idea. It was just more innovative than technology could handle at that time. Today, Google came out with a new glasses that kind of looks like a pair of Ray-Bans. And what you see and the power of integrating AI and other technologies with that, we have really great possibilities of bringing some of the augmented world into the real world. And what that means for L&D, that means learning is actually going to become more immersive. The next trend that we see, and this is an ongoing trend, because for the last 5 years, a lot of HR have been talking about this workforce agility that we're looking for. And so skills remain the center of your agility strategy. And what that means is that organizations want to move to skills-based operating models or become an entirely skills-based organizations. And just to reassure you, we're not there yet. So we've been talking about it for 5 years. Some organizations are starting to implement some operating models based on skills. And so what we see probably in the next 10 years, we're going to get real-life examples of corporations that have gone to a completely skills-based model, but for right now, we're seeing it in different areas of expertise in HR. And what that means, if skills is still, the primary piece in the skills economy of tomorrow, is that that you can be HR in supporting the business can be more impactful. So learning can have better business impact when you apply skills philosophy inside of it. The next one is really around human centricity, because with all this technology, with 5 years, I think we're going on 5 years post-pandemic, people are still looking for that human touch. You see programs around ESG and other kind of human-centered programs it's not only necessary, they see the value in that. And what AI can expose in that sense is a necessity for humans to still be in the loop. That's why when we're talking today about replacement or displacement, that's not the right word. It really is work augmentation. And so when you think about that human connection, you know that the key word means democratized, because if we're learning off of humans, if we're learning off each other, everything is either crowdsourced or socially collected. We know that for learning, that's going to be a huge part of it. Earlier in the panelist session, Alan was talking about the power of communities, and this is what we're talking about. We've been talking about communities through the era of social media, and yet what we're seeing today is that's still front and center, and it's even stronger today, that human connection and humans in the loop of all this technology. So that's going to be a trend. And then finally, we touched a little bit about this when we're talking about managed services and buying expertise, is a real need for L&D to shift and upskill in certain areas of their activities to kind of face this future-facing strategy that they may have within their organizations. And so when L&D realizes, not realizes, that sounds really bad. So when L&D starts to make this change, we're moving from a model that was a little bit more analog of what we knew maybe 10, 15 years ago, analog order takers, to a digitally fluent and data fluent value creator. And that's sort of the new role of L&D. And how do you get there is really by upskilling and changing your business model. And what that means, when you start to embrace these upskilling within your own teams, you're going to create that agility, right? Because the more expertise you have, the more agile your organization becomes. contrary to what a lot of people think, that, you know, I'm going to hire a bunch of generalists and that way I can be very agile. Agility comes with a deep expertise and knowing where to move those skills within an organization, because you have the technology that's going to drive the movement and velocity of skills. So, with that, I want to share a quote and kind of get into the heart of the subject. Let's talk about driving AI culture. Is a quote from Max Brooks. Now, Max Brooks, if you don't know him, he wrote the zombie survival guide, like how to, you know, survive the apocalypse, the zombie apocalypse. And he says that if you start to build your arc when you see the first drops of rain, it might be a little too late. And preparing for this kind of cultural shift that you need to support the scale of AI, start now. If you haven't started, start now. And I'm going to give you a lot of really easy, practical practitioner tips for that. But the idea is it's never too late to start, except when you see a zombie at your door, right, maybe. But it's never too late to start. And the second piece of that is, if you haven't started, here are some really, really good ways of thinking about it. So, I want to start out talking, before all of the culture pieces, is to talk about three different areas or three different users of AI. And this is a model that McKinsey actually came out with a few years ago about the takers, shapers, and makers. So what does that mean? So takers, that's kind of obvious. Those are people who use AI, right? That means it's potentially everybody in your organization. They leverage AI, whether it's Gen AI, machine learning, or just any other types of AI that can be available in your organization. These are the takers. And so building a robust program for everybody is something very important. The second aspect is you're going to have shapers within your organization. And these are the people who are shaping the policies, shaping the usage, shaping the way your organization actually looks at AI. Those shapers have special needs around training, and they have special requirements to do their job very well. I'm going to dip a little bit into that a little bit later. And then finally, the makers. Those are the technical profiles within your organization that's actually going to build or integrate AI into the applications, whether it's internally or for your clients, or those are the ones that need a little bit of special attention when you're looking at your AI Academy. So what does that kind of mean? Let's dive into takers. Takers is a special group, because the first thing you need to teach every employee is around basic AI literacy. So the skills that they need are really around the good usage, which is what the shapers are going to be building, right? How to use it ethically, what are the values around it? And so as the shapers build out those policies, it is L&D's responsibility to really give basic literacy around that. The second part of those types of skills is, you know, we talked a lot about, can you really build a lot of prompt engineers very, very quickly within your organization? And what is the skills that you need? Well, the skills that you need really around prompt engineering is around basic literacy and communication. So when you're looking about how to upskill this population, be sure to focus not on how to write a proper prompt, which is different, slightly different from prompt engineering, is how to communicate with that piece of technology, and how to interpret the data. So that goes into fluency. So your learning map for all the takers are going to look probably a little bit of like the skill set that you see here. When we move over to shapers, this is an organization, these people, they're usually policy-driven, some are anchored in HR specialisms, some are anchored in IT, and some are anchored in legal. This is the population you are going to train first, because they have to understand the impact of the technology into your organization to build the guardrails and the special charter that you might need to do that. So the skills that you need to leverage AI, here's a few of them. And that you see that a little bit more around the governance and implementation and how to think strategically, those become add-ons to building your program. And then finally, we're looking at the makers. When we look at the makers, what we see is the people who are going to build and integrate that. Yes, this is your IT department, but it's a subsection of your IT department. And it actually can include others in kind of a cross-functional setup. All of these skills that you see below here, including, for example, the advanced programming and, the people who are actually going to understand how APIs and everything is interconnected. This is where you get the robustness of your program. And so when you're thinking about some of the points to consider, what you're going to be looking at is, remember that your AI Academy has to include takers, shapers, and makers within your landscape. That's the first thing. The second thing is understanding that skills is the common denominator when you're thinking about measuring whether or not you're making an impact. You don't want to say to a business leader, I have, 15 people or 15,000 people have completed a course in data literacy, or, I have a 97% completion rate on our AI values course. What business wants to hear is, I've moved 15% of our population from a beginner to an expert level within 18 months in AI, because that's a critical skill that we might need. And so so skills becomes the centerpiece to tracking the progress of that and tracking the progress of your transformation. The next takeaway I really think is important is, remember, I said shapers should be trained first and your team should be trained first. So please remember that your teams are takers. So use them, use L&D organization and HR organization as a whole to really spread this, to start with them and let them be the leaders of change. And then finally, the last kind of points to consider around this is around talent intelligence. Talent intelligence, and I like to think about data points as a bed of nails. So if you only have a few touch points of nails or data points around AI and around skills and how you are transforming, it kind of hurts. You're going to fall through if you try to lay on it. But the more data points that you can get using talent intelligence technology, the better the more comfortable your bed is. And so think about talent intelligence and those data points to kind of track mobility, track skills velocities, track skills progress for your AI programs. It's definitely something that is going to help you keep close to the business and understand really how you can measure that success of your cultural scale. So I know I said a lot. I want to switch gears really, really quickly and move to a separate topic. So that was the upskilling piece. Since we're in the UK, I thought an appropriate quote would be from Winston Churchill, who says that attitudes is a little thing that makes a big difference. And I think that we can find a lot of places in our life for to apply that, but it's especially impactful here. So I want to talk to you today about AI archetypes. And you're going to recognize some of these archetypes because they're probably a lot of the same archetypes that we'd have when we're looking at typical change management. You know, these are the archetypes that you want to look for, and you want to kind of treat each population a little bit differently. And so there are a few that are kind of self-explanatory, but I'm going to deep dive into each one of them. But before that, just in terms of your participation on this, as I am describing the different archetypes, I would love for you to think about you personally and what kind of archetype are you? Now, you can go ahead and guess right now and think, okay, I'm probably this, but I'm going to go through and flesh this out a little bit more and you add some nuance to it. So feel free to use the Mentimeter to tell me what archetype you find yourself in. Okay, ready? Okay, so let's talk about the first archetype, right? Which is really, this is the easy one. You know, these are the ones that it's called the AI optimist. And I am definitely an AI optimist. And these optimists, obviously, you're always going to want to use the optimist as the champions of change. In typical change management, whether it's any kind of different transformation, you want to identify your early adopters, and you want to take special white glove treatment to them because they are going to be the catalyst for change within your organization. So you should be using AI optimists as your AI ambassadors, just like when we were first talking about digital transformation, 15, 20 years ago, we would look for those digital champions, right? This is the same thing. Those AI ambassadors are the ones that are going to evangelize, but also show others what good looks like. So the way you leverage them in your cultural change is to give them a lot of opportunity to show others what good looks like, involve them in some maybe high-risk projects. You want to make sure that you're keeping them excited but not overloaded. So watch out, you don't want to give them too much. Their excitement will go overboard if you don't create a framework for them. But having a robust role for them within your change strategy is something that's really, really important. I'm going to do a quick time check. So the next one, so I don't know how many AI optimists are out there, but if you're gung-ho, ready to go, and people need to hold you back and using ChatGPT everywhere, you're probably an optimist. Or you might be an underground user, but I'll get to that in a second. The next one I want to deal with is the hesitant. So these are the cautious adopters. Like, I want to believe, but I'm a doubting Thomas, and I need to see to believe. So these are the people that you can easily convert into optimist, but you need to spend just a little bit more time with them. So what do optimists really need? What do hesitants really need is you probably want to give them a lot of hands-on training and expose them to AI very, very quickly. But you want to do this in very safe environments where they can't break anything, but also a controlled environment where they feel like if they make a mistake, if they upload a file to an LLM that is confidential, those kinds of acts, you want to make sure that their stress level is very low. So you want to make sure that when you're training them, you're giving them that safe environment where they can make a lot of mistakes and learn from that, because that's what's going to convert your hesitant to an optimist. The other thing that you want to do is pair them with optimists, because when you do, that enthusiasm is very infectious, and it could make the difference between, okay, I was a little bit skeptical and now I see the real value and now I'm going to be one of your champions. But you do need to be very transparent. So some of the lookout points for your hesitant is you need to be very transparent about your policies, and you need to reassure them about proper ethical usage and guidelines. This is like really, really important, because they need to be reassured that you're not going to, as an organization, abuse the way AI is used. And there I'm kind of putting in parentheses the idea of work displacement. You want to reassure them that their job is not in risk, and that they need to embrace AI in terms of potentially finding work augmentation opportunities. I'm going to go just a little bit faster. I see I have 4 minutes left. The next one that we're dealing with is the AI skeptic. And we see those everywhere. The skeptics are the ones that keep us honest, right? The skeptics they are the ones that are going to drive change slower, but when they take a step, it's a sure step. And I don't know if I really conveyed that really properly, but when I say they keep us honest, is they're going to the ones that raise those hairy questions about the usage. They're going to force the organization to take a stand on the way AI is implemented within the organization. But they are also going to be the ones, even though they're a little resistant to this AI change, what you'll see is when they finally embrace it, and we have been able to calm all of their fears around it, they can be really, really a great motor for problem solving. So you want to involve them. You want to show them proof points where AI can not outperform humans, but AI can collaborate with humans to solve problems that maybe were out of their reach. So really, when I talk about the proof point, the skeptics, they need to see the use cases. You need to expose them to success stories as quickly as possible, testimonials, and even couple them in mentoring, kind of do some reverse mentoring with the optimist to balance out some of those fears. But the one thing you should not do with a skeptic is say that what they're fearful of is not very important. So you really want to make sure you're acknowledging their fears, and that you validate some of them, and maybe even share some of those. You can still be an optimist and have some fears. So being very transparent about that, and recognizing that they might not be ready. Don't push them. Don't ever force a skeptic to use AI before they're ready. You have a lot of convincing to do before that actually happens. And finally, what's past a skeptic is the AI observer. I am closely watching. I'm not quite there yet. I'm a little bit wary of it, but I'm watching my colleague who's actually looking at this from a different angle, and maybe I'm a little AI curious at how they're doing that. So they probably don't have strong views about AI in one way or another. They're probably sick of hearing about it. I'm kind of sick of talking about it. But what you can do with the observers is you want to give them low-stake opportunities to not only, you want to train them quickly like everybody else, but you want to give them low-stake opportunities to practice AI. And that might mean just little things around small projects, doing something for your manager, or partnering with a peer to have that happen. The observer needs to be invited to do things in a very concrete and very small-stepped way. They're a little less resistant to the change that you might see, but you want to encourage them to kind of start looking at AI-related projects. And just like the skeptic, you want to expose them to good use cases, but that's more to inspire them than to convince them that AI isn't all evil. And then finally, what you want to watch out for is you want to make sure that it's not because they're not using AI today that you can ignore them. So make sure that any kind of plan or like if you're organizing an AI day, let's get them out there. Let's get them exposed to that. If you have one of the ideas is to kind of drive culture is around creating a promptathon. You might want them maybe not participate in the promptathon, but submit some prompts to their manager or to their teams and kind of share prompts that are kind of low stakes and easy to manage. That's something that is going to be applicable for their work. So giving them ideas on how to do that is really great. And finally, I'm at time, and I have one more archetype to talk about. It's really the underground user. And the underground user is really interesting because they're probably experimenting, they're probably doing it, and they might even be some of the best AI adopters within your organization, but you don't know about them, and they certainly won't tell you about them. So with this population, what is important is to make sure you're creating that safe encapsulated space for them, because if they're not if they're not looking at if they're not being in process, you don't want to punish them for that, but you want to make sure that you're slowly pushing them towards kind of the correct usage of that. But you want to keep their enthusiasm around AI really, really specific. And with that, since we are out of time, I've managed my time really badly. I'm going to just show you quickly on the screen some of the takeaways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the time.
Okay.
It's fine. It's really engaging. So let's look at the takeaways that you come to, because I think we'd all recognize them.
All right, okay, so the takeaways, obviously, in any cultural change, any transformation, focus on upskilling and reskilling. I think that I gave you enough information around those AI academies. The second part is, obviously, with every one of those archetypes, you need to make sure you're building transparency and trust. And in AI, this is even more important than other aspects of compliance and regulation. That transparency and trust is going to allow adoption to really take off. The third one is really about show them what good looks like. Examples, case studies, testimonials, people talking about it. That's the culture that you need. And I have in kind of the subtext is, can anybody say promptathon? Promptathon, like a hackathon, is something that can really kind of spur the use of Gen AI within your organization in very concrete use case studies that are going to anchor in and help propel your business. And then the last one is around starting small and communicating widely. I keep talking about testimonials, use cases. You don't want to go too fast in this, the ramp up of AI, because you want these concrete use cases. You want people to understand how you can look at how your organization and its specificities fine-tuned to their specific job is going to work. So go slow, talk loudly at success, and good luck with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I think that's great and really insightful in terms of, I think some things that came out previously, taking things one step at a time, recognizing what you're trying to do, linking it back to the learning that you can influence, and I hesitate to say common sense. It's not common sense, because if it's common sense, we'd all do it. But some real key lessons that any of us in the L&D world, I think, can latch onto, especially in a new area like this. I don't know about you. I was dying to find out what the audience thought they were. So let's just wrap it. I think, can we show the results of the Mentimeter? Oh my gosh!
Oh,
So
awesome.
look at that, 56 optimists. I like it. 56% optimists, sorry.
Yeah.
Some hesitance, some skeptics there.
Yeah, that's
But I'm a little bit worried about the group in the audience. There are a lot of underground users there.
That's right.
Whilst I don't personally know everyone in the audience, I'm sure they're all really optimists underneath and just hiding behind the cloak of being underground users. But great to see that people took part, and thank you, Annie, for taking the time to share the presentation with us. And I hope you've all picked up something there. We will come back as in the wrap-up session if anyone's got any burning issues to address with you.
Absolutely.
But we'll take a step back now. We're gonna move to our final case study of the day. We're going to take a quick turnaround in 10 minutes. We'll come back at the top of the hour with Tony and Sarah, who are going to share some of the partnership experience they've had together over a number of years in the relationship between ourselves and Detroit Energy. So we'll do that at the end of the break there, and we'll leave you in the capable hands of for one last time of Doug and Bob. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Doug, I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, so we're back from the coffee for the coffee break. I thought we had the last one, but I was wrong. So apologies for
That's
that.
right.
We don't have it at the bottom of the screen now, but our next session coming up is with the partnership that we have with DTE Energy, and we'll have a discussion with our client Tony coming on there. So an interesting discussion to come up there for that. What were your key takeaways from Annie's presentation? Bob?
I kind of like the archetypes. They're at the end, right? And those are archetypes you see with technology adoption in general. It's just where applied to the specific AI instance, but the making the best out of where you find folks in your organization and ways to bring them on board, without turning them off or turning them in the other direction. So I find that construct very, very helpful.
Definitely, I found that to be interesting, as well as the results of the survey, what people were saying about that. So, just to remind everyone, please, if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, if you're joining us on YouTube, subscribe to us there and like. Also on LinkedIn, you can follow us. We have a regular newsletter. I haven't mentioned our website, but we have our website as well, where you can find more information about VPS. We have a lot of useful resources on there. We have a blog on there as well with regular insights into learning, and probably we're going to create some content from the event today. So if you keep an eye on our blog, you'll be able to get some of the key insights and highlights to share going forwards. Don't forget as well, is if you've missed anything, you can catch up on the videos both on YouTube and on LinkedIn, whichever platform you're joining us on. I've noticed a lot of people have done that. We've had almost 4 times the number of attendees that have attended the live event. So if you want to catch up on something, you can do that. But of course, you don't have the access to instant thought leadership. So always better to stay on and to ask your questions in the chat. So had as well, Anna Kevin has commented, thanks so much, very interesting to listen to on the last presentation. If there are any questions going into the last part, don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and we can answer those questions for you.
Yeah,
So,
Douglas, I'm really looking forward to I was going to say, I'm really looking forward to the next event or part of this. We specifically set the theme of this around partnerships, and we started with Steve talking about, a way we went out to industry to get perspectives as one way of partnership. But the next story we're going to hear about is an 18-year relationship. And you think about all the things we've been talking about these past couple of days in terms of technology and what's changed. And folks didn't get a chance to hear, speak, ask questions of folks that have ridden that roller coaster and seen the value in a partnership and why that made sense and continues to make sense. So I think it's a really cool opportunity, a good way to end the forum here.
Definitely, that's a fantastic story of a great long-term relationships. I think that's one of the things that we see repeated in VPS, that we do have a lot of long-term clients who stay with us through the course, and that's a great example of those stories. We also, I can see here that Brian has commented on the last one, that he particularly appreciated the discussion of skills needed for the takers, the shapers, and the makers. So that was very useful for him. So we have
I like
a few minutes left.
I was just going to say, Douglas, I like that as well. And that's another thing, that the skills that tied in. You started with the discussion on day one around the 75 different skills that were laid out. It was woven into what Michael talked about, and now it surfaces again here in Annie's presentation. So we're definitely seeing that theme, and that was highlighted by Michael put together as well, of moving from competencies to skills, and skills for performance. So yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, definitely. We've just a few minutes left until the hour, so if you are going to get a cup of coffee to join for the last session, you definitely don't want to miss. Make sure that you get a cup of coffee or take your comfort break. You're sure to want to stay for the last hour with us. And we'll also do a sum up after that, summing up the key takeaways from the 2 days. There may be an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you do have anything, as we say, pop that into the chat there. So you can chat on both LinkedIn and on the YouTube channel. Okay. So I think I'm getting the 2-minute warning coming up from the team, the technical team telling me. So it'll be very shortly. We'll be moving over. Yeah.
The 2-minute warning in American football means about another 20 minutes of broadcast, because you get a whole bunch of timeouts and everything in between. So I think this is an actual 2 minutes. This is more like European football with a running clock. So there you go.
Yes. So our German European headquarters have their influence on us for the punctuality and efficiency.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so we just received the warning. It will be moving over any moment now. So let's get ready for that.
Excellent. Well, it's fun doing this with you today, Douglas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I appreciate Douglas and Bob working with the guys in the audience. And as you talked about, we're going to really zoom back in from the purely technical world to the actual world of partnership. And we wanted to give an example and tell a story really of an enduring relationship that has helped DTE address the challenges as their business has developed, and provide the learning to support the business as it's moved through the last 18 years, as you said, Bob, in the coffee area there. And I'm really pleased that we are joined by our colleagues Tony Battle from DTE and Sarah Markland from VPS. Looking forward to your presentation, guys. And Bob's you know, I think said it all to the group during the coffee that we really see this as an opportunity to share how a relationship has flexed, scaled up and down, adopted new technology over such a period of time. And as our previous presenters have said, there has been fundamental changes in tech over that time, but still the need to provide engaging, meaningful learning that actually gives our teams the tools they need to do their jobs better is really what it's all about. So I'm going to exit stage left and leave you guys to share your story with us. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the introduction. As he mentioned, I'm the program manager for our DTE client here at VPS. And my background is in instructional design and project management. And for most of my career, I've been focused on the energy and utility space and had the great opportunity of working with Tony. DTE is our main energy utility provider here in Michigan. They provide over 3.5 million customers throughout the state with both electric and natural gas services, and they have about 10,000 employees. So as Bob mentioned, we've been partners since 2007. At the time, this was really the first of its kind in terms of end-to-end learning outsourced partnerships in the energy space. So while our services and support have really evolved in the past, almost 2 decades, our partnership covers all aspects of learning, from curriculum analysis, learning solution design, content design and development, learning administration, LMS support, delivery, logistics, as well as program management. So Tony, I really appreciate you being here with us today and speaking in the forum. To get us started, I just kind of thought it'd be great if you could give us a little bit of your background and then let us know what initially drove DTE to look for a learning partner.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today. My name is Tony Battle. As Sarah said, I work with DTE Energy in Southeast Michigan. We manage the learning function for about 10,000 employees. As Sarah said, around 5,000 contractors or contingent workforce. So back in 2007, which predates my joining DTE a little bit, I've been here for about 14 years. The organization was looking to centralize our training operations in a lot of ways. It was sporadically applied through all of our different business units with very little common standard, common process, common system. It was kind of all over the place. And it was based on those with specific expertise. Those who did it well got to train. That was the expertise we applied. So the idea was to centralize it and develop a core of expertise. The second, of course, was to manage costs. We did a lot of work sporadically within each of the individual business units, but we applied various and varied contract resources with no real thread to them or no method to the management of that contract workforce. So there's a lot of cost associated with that. So the idea was to take a much more specific look at that. And the third, it occurs to me as I listened to Annie's presentation from Cornerstone, was to apply a bit of agility in the way that we apply learning at DTE Energy. So Annie says agility comes with deep expertise and the ability to apply resources in a flexible manner. We couldn't do that. We had resources firmly entrenched in each of the business units, and they did their own work specifically. Part of the effort was to generate a partnership that allowed us that agility of applying resources across business units, across disciplines, across technical content. And that drove what has been a series of contract renewals and inflations and deflations as the journey has taken us over time based on the economy and what we need here, changing technologies, VPS's expertise and what they bring to the table. So that kind of generated a long-term partnership that we continue to this day.
Thanks, Tony. And yeah, when we think back to 2007, I know neither one of us were really on the program at that time, but from 2007 to where we are today, we have undergone quite the transformation and adaptation throughout the years and changes in technology. So We do have sort of a timeline that we walked through to look through some of the phases of our partnership. And I thought we could start by just looking at that initial transition. Once DTE decided to engage with VPS and what that initial transition looked like from your side. I think we have the visual for that. There we go.
Yeah. So initially, the contract was, as Sarah said, kind of the first of its kind, and it was bartered via a consulting group that managed a binder that is this thick of documents because it was the first of its kind, really a total outsource, and it generated that legal framework within which this would all work, because we're a heavily regulated organization with significant oversight by agencies nationwide in the U.S. So the transition had to do with an onboarding partnership. How do you integrate an external entity into an organization like ours that is so heavily change managed and, quite honestly, very resistant to change? The audience at that time in 2007 had been here for years and years and years. We're very, I guess you could say, family-based organization, many generations of individuals, and so change was difficult at that point. A lot of change management resources applied initially to make that smoother, to really understand our business, and then understanding how are we going to govern this big beast now that is now centralized, and make sure that it continues to improve over time, reduces cost over time, increases efficiencies, and still measures outstanding learning output. So it's a big deal coming into play here. It took us a while to figure it out, but it was worth the time and effort for sure.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there were really two big changes happening at the same time, right? There was the centralization of the learning organization internally at DTE, as well as bringing in a learning partner. So both of those brought their own change management challenges, and I think it's important to highlight that transition takes some time, and that onboarding takes time, and change doesn't happen overnight. So we had a great team working together and working through those challenges there at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Good. And then moving on to the next phase, we looked at once we had our footing, right? Once we had that initial transition, understood governance, how we were going to communicate and manage this beast of a transition. Once we got that footing in place, it really, our primary focus became, how do we increase learning accessibility? How do we boost compliance? How do we measure learning compliance, and what are learning requirements? So that led to quite the training transformation, where DTE was primarily, I'll say, an ILT based organization at the time. So working through introducing blended learning as well as learner support were really two of those main things we did in that phase. But didn't know if you wanted to speak a little bit more to that transformational phase that we went through after transition.
Yeah, that was probably the second phase. As you said, we had really substandard systems within which to apply digital learning, and it was relatively new at this point in technologies development. And so we did most things from an instructor-led capacity, which is warranted given the large amount of field workforce we have. But there was no consideration to blended learning at that time. And so this is where we put our heads together and said, what are those things we could do and provide a more agile or flexible learning construct for our users who are primarily in the field. So we worked through the development of an exceptional amount of web-based training and incredible improvements in our learning systems to distribute that learning. The issues that we had at that point were not only in metrics that validate learning is occurring, but also metrics that validate compliance is happening. Because we are so heavily regulated, it is an extreme focus of our organizations as well as our regulators So we had to have our eye on two different balls at the same time to ensure that we were really moving the contract in the way it was intended to be moved. And this was that phase that started us in that direction. It was a lot of work and a lot of expertise that Vertex brought to the table to make that happen.
Yeah, agreed. I know introducing blended learning it wasn't always met with a lot of excitement at first. But again, we dove into what were some of those systematic issues and things that were preventing us from getting learning to the learners effectively and quickly and when they needed it. So one of the things I've always really appreciated about our partnership and our relationship between the two organizations is how we both have that continuous improvement mentality at our core. So we are constantly looking at tools, technology, processes, outcomes, environmental outcomes with energy, and looking at how we can both streamline operations, but more specifically achieve better results in the learning organization. And, we have established that relationship where we're not afraid to sit down and say, listen, this is not working, or this is working really well over in this space, and really kind of get down into the nitty gritty of what we need to do to get that efficiency and accuracy that we're looking at. And one of the areas we focused on in continuous improvement quite a lot, and I know it's been a theme of this entire forum as well, is the learning management system, or systems in our case with DTE, and just looking at how those changes and how those processes that we've looked at in terms of LMS have affected how learning is viewed and prioritized from the organization.
Yeah, it's a radical transformation with the technology able to distribute learning to anyone, anywhere. We still have a bit of a pushback from some of our field workforce who's a bit more mature and hesitant, but it does seem that they can get to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. They can now get to our learning management system. I'm fully confident. And the timing, as Sarah said, was perfect in terms of the contract inception, because DTE was a very continuous improvement focused organization and moving heavily into that based on a lot of concepts from Toyota and other lean engineering, lean manufacturing disciplines. And Vertex brought to the table their expertise already in Six Sigma. And the two paired very well together. The language was similar. The way we worked was extremely smooth and seamless. And so I think that really helped acceptance especially from our executive and our middle management or leadership perspective in the company.
Yeah, I think that, as well as I think the shifts from different LMS systems and what we were looking for from each one really helped establish, I'll say, governance in terms of as an organization. You have a large organization, even though learning is centralized, you still have different business units. IT's trying to run off with this course that's now required, or things like that. And I think at least what I saw in those LMS transitions is it was an opportunity for the organization as a whole to really come together and say, okay, how do we want to handle learning rollouts? What are those requirements? Who are the learners? Let's stop. I think someone said earlier, it's raining training. How do we stop that phenomenon from happening and make sure that the learning is going to the appropriate audience, and only that audience that needs to have it?
Yeah, we can't pretend that governance is easy for us. We at DTE we're really a collection of companies, many of whom were governed on their own for years and years and years. So prescribing for them how we'll manage, what our protocol will be, is always a challenge. There's days I feel like a tennis player where I'm kind of swatting the ball back over the net to say, nope, we're not going to do that. Nope, we're not going to do that. And this is how we're going to manage it. You become a bit of a traffic signal at times. But in the end, we are trying to avoid its raining training, which it often feels like at times. Our business units, like any other large company, are puppies in a box, and when they have a direction, they run off as fast as they can to achieve. And so we need to kind of allow them those guide rails to show them achievement within a certain perspective is really how they want to move, as opposed to 100 miles an hour all the time. But yeah, we've really grown in that respect with our implementation of new learning management systems. I would prefer never to implement one again, but should it happen, we have ample expertise in how to do it.
Yes. We know how to do it. The business is in a much better place to do it, and we have those kind of standardized processes and optimized processes that we've looked at, and we know what works now in terms of it's not just a transition of, content pieces go from LMS A to LMS B. It's setting up those, the curricula and the assignments and all of that good stuff that comes with it that I feel like we've really fine-tuned over the years. All right. If you guys want to move to the next slide, we'll look at technology and automation. Actually, it might be one more forward. So through the years and our focus of CI, we've introduced a lot of automated solutions, and that doesn't always come easily, right? There's always challenges with that, but looking at how can we automate not just what we do, but how can we make things a little more streamlined for the entire learning organization as well as the learners, and continuing to explore right now, the hot topic of AI and machine learning, but exploring cautiously what those things could do for the learning organization. So just curious, in terms of automation and technology, how that's impacted your team and those day-to-day activities of your team as we've moved forward.
I think that firstly, automation is really what provides us the efficiency that we need under the same constraints, challenges, and cost considerations that any other organization is under. There's always the pressure to do more with less. Automation is our ticket in some ways to help that from an internal perspective, but it's also our ticket to make our world easier for our customers to navigate. We can be a complex organization to find and or work with. The more we can provide them with a seamless way to inquire of us, request of us, work with us, the better we tend to be. So a lot of our efforts are currently going into automation of learning, even into flexible curricula with retraining timeframes and blended learning solutions that automatically shows up on your learning plan when you need it, and you're notified of it, and then the reporting of your compliance and completion is automated on the back end. Trying to manage that value stream is what makes ourselves more efficient, but it also provides a better experience for our business units and our customers. That's in the automation space. So the AI space is where we are a bit, as you said, Sarah, a bit more cautious. Our executive leadership truly wants us to move there because they see the potential benefit, as do we. But being as heavily regulated as we are, managing Southeastern Michigan's energy grid, we are very cautious as to how we access information and how our information is available from an outside perspective. And so AI for us is an area we step into with some caution. I wouldn't say trepidation, but in a very deliberate and intentful manner, so we can test pieces of it as we go. And there we work with our Vertex partners as well, who are, I will say, experimenting with different ways to do things. We've used AI to get, I would say, general constructs of learning together, but being a very specialized organization, we use that as a basis from which to still do analysis and design and development that requires adult learning professionals, and that's what Vertex is bringing us currently. So we're kind of stepping into the pool lightly, understanding some of the cautions that
Mhm.
that we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. There was actually a comment earlier, I believe it was Michael, who was highlighting, there's so much advancement in technology, um, so much going on in that space so quickly, that it's almost impossible to keep up, right? And so it's up to organizations to figure out where you are and what makes sense for you as an organization, how you're going to move forward. But also, he made a comment that really resonated with me around technology advancements shouldn't be done just for the sake of efficiency. We need to be looking at them in terms of having a learner first mentality. So, how do those, I'll say, automation, technology, process improvements, how do those things kind of keep the learner in mind first? And I really think it has been a driver behind a lot of the improvements we've made along the way. We look at our learners as our customers and say, how do we make it easier for them to access training? How do we make it easier for them to complete the learning and understand what's required? And in your case with the compliance, regulations, how do we make sure their completions are reported accurately and quickly so it doesn't have any type of negative impact on their ability to perform their job? And I think one of the things that some of our technology solutions have done for us is just make a more consistent and predictable learning outcome. And even in terms of things like scheduling, we put together an automated, or not automated, but automated scheduling tool that really contains all the information that isn't in an LMS. So it has your rooms, it has your, instructor qualifications and things like that, but it also has what equipment is needed. What facilities can house this training? Where can this training take place? And I think improvements like that made it possible for us to take a lot of that knowledge out of certain people's heads. There's always that one person that you say, oh, if it's happening over at Warren Service Center, we need to talk to Jerry. But taking some of that knowledge and making sure we have it captured and in a tool so that anyone who's scheduling that learning is going to know exactly what needs to happen. And we've tied it to the LMS so that the learners know exactly where they need to go, when they need to be there. They know an instructor is going to show up. And I just think it was a really good point to make sure that anytime we're looking at improvements, we're doing it from a learner first mentality.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So throughout our transition, if you want to move to the next slide here, obviously we just recapped 18 years pretty quickly. There was a lot more to it, but we really have to celebrate some of these results that you've seen as an organization through the partnership. We've achieved some incredible things together here in terms of operational cost reduction, increase in training completions, overall compliance for the organization, as well as one that I'm particularly proud of is the internal customer satisfaction. Didn't know if you just wanted to go into any of these in a little more detail.
Yeah, no, that would be great. The contract for us has borne the fruit we had hoped it would. The reduction in the annual operating cost has a lot to do with where our resources are applied and our flexibility in renegotiation, recontracting with our Vertex partners, but also in the efficiencies gained on the work we do with them. Our training completions are less so more we can fire hose training out to everybody and it's raining training. We're proud that we're able to increase that. It's not the end all be all though. We were stuck in a previous life with a very constrained system that depended upon instructor-led delivery available only through a very small group of skilled individuals internally. So what we did was broaden that, bring in a partner who could apply more of that expertise, but also help us transition where we could to a more digital or blended perspective. We basically took the constraint on our garden hose and we opened it up and we allowed that volume, a broader perspective, a broader audience, the tune of 600%. since our initial contract. Our compliance is an exceptionally important number for us. It's never 100%, but it essentially says, based on the field jobs that you do and the regulations that apply to your work, the environments you enter, the tools you use, the activities you perform, that you are compliant to that regulation, which generally states thou shalt have training, and generally on a regular basis. We were able to take that number from an exceedingly low 60-some% perspective. We were not a very compliant organization to somewhere north of 98%, depending upon the time of year. We do that because we plan and plan and plan to manage that number and ensure we know when people are expiring, and we're able to address that. This number really gets to the resources we work with at Vertex in our scheduling, our logistics, our delivery, our rostering, all of that function, as well as our content development partnership, because that's what enables the blended learning that enables someone to take required training at 11 o'clock at night should they choose to do so, and not be dependent on a class 6 weeks down the road. So where we can, we've been able to increase that compliance. And then, most importantly, I think, as Sarah noted, with automation, it's not really just for the sake of efficiency and making the numbers tell a good story, but the internal customer satisfaction is true data from our customers annually around their satisfaction with our collective operation and our sub-functions. And it allows them to give us some input as to where we're achieving, where we're helping, where we're less than optimal. And we can use that in our CI expertise. That was a very low number for a long, long time. And it has averaged out between 96 and 98% annually the last 3 or 4 years. And it goes to what we call the usual suspects. These are people who we work with all the time, some of whom we have very good working relations with, some of whom it hasn't gone as well, but they are all included and given the ability to provide us feedback. So for us to be able to get an overall satisfaction percentage in the 97% is something to celebrate for us, but we also learn a lot in the verbatims about where we can improve. So these are some big numbers, some big takeaways from the contract and the relationship that we have had, that we've grown over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tony. And then I kind of want to shift gears. If we look at the next slide, we've talked a lot about just our partnership evolution over time. But one of those areas that we focus on is really content development. And we've introduced, as I mentioned earlier, when we first came on as partners, we were looking at over 85% of content in that space was about ILT, or instructor-led classroom delivery. So over the years, we've introduced quite a bit of technology in the content development space to modernize the curriculum, increase learner engagement. And again, not introducing it just to introduce it because it's the shiny new technology, but we've done this really in response to increasing the learner experience. And as Bob said earlier, picking the appropriate technology for the learning. I know AI is the big thing now. We were in AR, VR for a while, but it's really just about focusing on what are the learning objectives, what are the performance goals, and then balancing that, right, Tony, with your business needs and requirements as well. So just kind of wanted your thoughts here on that overall evolution of content development. I know this is one we're particularly proud of as well.
Absolutely. The chart makes it pretty clear, probably for me because I've seen it so much, but the blue bars represent where we were in an instructor-led modality, and we started very heavily in that space. Justifiably so in a lot of ways. We're a field-based organization. We have a lot of hands-on evaluation that's required of us. And our digital or web-based training was minimal at that time, in a lot of ways because it was in its infancy and our systems were not great at distribution. we really grew that web-based component. And I think part of what our relationship with Vertex led us to understand is how fast and how well we could do it, but also where it's not really pertinent or appropriate, or where it's not received well. So you can see that red bar growing, but at some point we readdress that red bar and we begin to say, where is it really most appropriate, and what could we couple with it to make it a bit more of an immersive or a blended experience? And that's where you see different colors on the chart appear. The job aid, the video, different types of interactive digital media that would be not considered web-based training or video, but an amalgamation of that. And so that's what we manage now. So as a part of our partnership, on a monthly basis, we have what we call a true-up meeting, but we look at the media mix every single month to see where we're going and where are we applying our funds with respect to all that media. So we look at the media mix. We look at the media mix by business unit, and that helps us at DTE Energy and my group of learning consultants work with our business units to make suggestions about where are we best positioned to support your learning, as opposed to being an easy button, which is what training can often become. I need web-based training and I need it to be 20 minutes. I need it to cover this. Let's talk about what is a more effective mix for you that might be a better business decision, a better learning decision. And so that's where you see the mix start to change, especially in the last few years in the partnership. So it's been a good story to tell about our evolution. We still have a long way to go in working with our customers about blended solutions, about mix, and the effectiveness of what we can do. But we have a really good start, I think, in our ability to do that.
Yeah, it's been nice. We've really been able to move the needle there, and again, consult with each other and with the business in terms of when does it make sense? Where does it make sense to use this? And I think at the very beginning, one of the charges was like, we need to do as little ILT as possible, and you see us moving in that direction. And then it's looking back and saying, wait a minute, the business needs ILT. There's time and place that we need to be hands-on with equipment and things like that. So it's really that partnership of us also learning your business and understanding what the learner needs are in that space so that we can adjust and say, okay, let's focus on what really needs to stay in the classroom or in hands-on, and then look at, like you said, partnering that with some blended learning. Can they maybe take 2 WBTs before they show up for a hands-on? And we're saving folks time from taking them out of the field, instructor time, all of that good stuff, but still making sure that the core of what they need is being taken care of.
Yeah, and I believe that we move this needle more gradually than most are comfortable with. But the reason we do that is because of the fact that we have so many different business units with different leadership, and the fact that we're not entirely centralized as a learning organization. So my team supports and has centralized a portion of learning at the company. There are a couple other business units that manage their own space. However, my team and Vertex are responsible to support them all. So while we don't have consistent governance amongst all of our customers, we have to nudge this needle over time as it makes sense, as opposed to saying governance has said it shall be. And so it's a more gradual evolution of learning in the company than many of us would like, but it is our reality given our construct, and Vertex has been very good with managing that for us.
Thanks, Tony. I think it's been a really important part of the success of the partnership is that, as you mentioned, our team is right there with your team. We have become part of your team. We're not just kind of off on the side waiting to take orders. And I think the ability for your team and our team to really be ingrained together in the business has been just one of the pivotal parts of the success of this relationship. And I think why it's lasted, 18 plus years and counting.
Vertex Reeses have Resources have DTE IDs. They work at DTE locations. They interact every single day with DTE subject matter experts. They work on our systems. They have permissions as an employee would. They have truly been an integrated partner over the years. And that does help acceptance as well when you see someone every single day, or when you see that resource again on the next project. It becomes a familiarity kind of a thing for us, and a comfort level amongst our customers for sure.
Okay, no, that's great. I know we're probably running short on time here, but I just wanted to highlight really quickly training administration. You know, I think it's one area that doesn't get as much publicity, if you will, in the learning organization, but I think training and learning administration is such an integral part of a successful learning organization, as we've seen through our partnership. And just wanted to know if you could just kind of note really quickly, you know, how important has that transformation in TA really been to DTE and their overall goals?
Yeah, training administration does not get a lot of love in the world of learning. That is for sure. You know, I heard a previous speaker liken it to the experience you want to have when you buy something from like an Amazon, where you click a button and everything after that happens, and it just shows up at your door. You know, you want training administration to work like that, but the reality is very few people realize the complexity behind all of the administration required of a learning organization, especially one that deals with a lot of compliance issues. So we have grown. We have very rigorous processes between how we administrate learning, the scheduling of it, the logistics associated with it, the rostering and the QA necessary in our learning management system, the reporting of it. It's that back end administration that very few people consider if you're not a part of a learning organization. When you're in it, you realize the criticality of it. It is another key pillar or key process in our organization that without we suffer for sure. And we know when there are gaps immediately, when you know, here's where we see it pop up in our organization. When we suffer an injury or a fatality, and there are immediate inquiries from legal, labor relations, human resources, corporate safety, Michigan, OSHA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And a lot of that has to be, how was this person trained? By whom, when, how often? Those records associated with it tell a story, and they need to be provided immediately. They depend upon the rigor associated with the work in the space. And we spend an inordinate amount of time focusing there, automating there, and managing process. But without it, we as a compliance-based organization are kind of sunk. So that's a big part of what Sarah and I and the leadership team look at every single week, where we're at with respect to our training administration team.
Yep, absolutely. That forecasting, the budgeting, the communication, all so important. And us having that governance. You and I have talked about how, you know, we talk all the time. We look at our metrics all the time. We look at our forecasts all the time, and people sometimes question whether we need to be looking at them that frequently. And our answer is always yes. That's why things are moving smoothly, because we're looking at them that frequently. So thank you, Tony.
Yeah, our goal as we end the month, as we end the quarter, as we end the year, is to end up where the forecast tells us we should be at. If we take our eye off the key metrics associated with the contract, even for a short period of time, we drift. So we remain flexible, and we adjust to the forecast to where we really think we can be, and the resources necessary to get us there. So yeah, it's a never-ending process in a good way, because it keeps our organizations tight, meeting every Tuesday morning at 7:30 to get the day started.
That's right. And then just finally, as we wrap up, Tony, oh, sorry, Steve, I saw you pop on.
No, please carry on.
I was just going to ask if you have a couple quick pieces of advice, Tony, for anyone who is looking at perhaps engaging in a learning partnership. You know, what would you say were just sort of the top couple lessons learned?
I would say really understand the scope that you wish to work with in a partner. Where are you comfortable using partnerships, and where is it necessary that you maintain that firm internal ownership or subject matter expertise that requires that you keep it? I would say that there are tremendous efficiencies involved with bringing on a learning partner where they specifically focus on adult learning, and the best methods to increase learning and competence and compliance in the organization, as opposed to using just some internal researchers who are pretty good at it, but they also have another job. Those are really areas we tried to move away from, such that we could put very specific focus and this agility around how we apply resources across all of our business units. That's possible. It is more possible when you have an external partner to support you in that space. So I would say really be cognizant of your scope. Where are you looking to outsource? Because it can be this big or it can be this big. And that really drives the conversation you have with your outsourced partner or the potential partner.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate you jumping on today and supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was great, really fascinating. And I think as Bob talked about earlier on, you know, tantamount to a great relationship. And I think for me, that chart of the mix of learning, whilst we were saying we weren't just about delivering volumes of learning, but just shows over that period of time how things have come in and out of a need, a requirement, priorities, and the flexibility that we talked about in the partnership agreement before, Sarah. So I think very well done to you and the team in that regard.
Thank you.
So that's cool. So we're gonna move forward. We're gonna keep you guys on the screen, and we're gonna start to pull the event to an end. I think I said to the group yesterday we were at the leading edge of pushing LinkedIn in particular to the limit. There is a fixed time limit, so I want to squeeze a few things in before we go away from today. And effectively pull together a wrap-up. As we do that, just a reminder, everybody has been kind enough to stay with us through the event, that there will be a pack sent out. There'll be links to the producers of the material, who have all kindly given their time and effort for us today. Would urge you to like and subscribe. I like saying that. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And equally, we want to keep the conversation going. And we'll want to ask you about that a wee bit later as well, about what you'd like to see, whether you'd like to see this kind of thing from us anymore, whether you'd like us just to go away quietly, hopefully not, and we'll come back with that. So we're going to move to the final wrap-up session, short transition, and we'll be back with you in a second.
Einstein once said that life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Leaders now more than ever must ensure their people possess the skills needed to adapt and evolve. We are not a typical learning provider. We apply sophisticated tools to create innovative, data-driven learning solutions aligned to user and business needs. Our methods combine strategic workforce planning with contemporary learning design, ensuring the value and business benefit are clear. Our global center of innovation adapts to changing behaviors, delivering blended learning solutions worldwide. We accelerate workforce performance by delivering outcomes that matter to you. Einstein once said that life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Leaders now more than ever must ensure their people possess the skills needed to adapt and evolve. We are not a typical learning provider. We apply sophisticated tools to create innovative, data-driven learning solutions aligned to user user and business needs. Our methods combine strategic workforce planning with contemporary learning design, ensuring the value and business benefit are clear. Our global center of innovation adapts to changing behaviors, delivering blended learning solutions worldwide. We accelerate workforce performance by delivering outcomes that matter to you.
Right, thank you for that. So, Andy, welcome back. Good to see you. We've got Bob, we've got Michael, we've got Doug and Sarah, of course, on screen. And I just want to say thanks to you guys. I want to quickly run through any highlights, any additions you want to make. We've got a couple of prompt screens that will come up, I'm sure, and we'll probably take it chronologically through the session. So, first of all, let's talk to you, Andy. You had the keynote speech. Have you got any key thoughts that you want to leave the group with?
Yeah, a very quick one. The underpinning theme has been partnerships, and I think what I've recognised just in seeing all the sessions, the case studies and the other talks, is that things are changing incredibly fast, and we don't want to be doing this alone. So the power of collaboration and events like this are just so important that we connect with people. So I think my takeaway is, in this fast-changing world of learning, make sure you're connected and really understand what partnerships will add benefit in your context.
Fantastic. And let's say, please stay connected to people you've met through the group. Similarly, Sarah, I'm going to put you on the spot. You didn't expect to be second there, but you're second now. So anything you would take away?
You know, I think partnership, but also I think Michael mentioned a couple times, just not necessarily jumping on technology bandwagons to jump on technology, making sure that it's the appropriate fit and that it works for the organization that you are supporting and their goals. So I think that was a good message to reaffirm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you. Likewise, Bob.
Yeah, Steve, just in lieu of a takeaway, I just want to thank everyone who took time out of their schedules to join us for part or all of both days, and folks that are going to be watching this as they download it. I hope it was as worthwhile for everybody else as it was for me in listening and learning and tying things together.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I would agree. I think that some of the insights we've picked up have been great from the people in the room, presentations we've seen, and Doug, would you echo that? Do you have anything last minute coming in from the floor, as it were?
No, I have no last minute questions, but generally the participations, everyone's been very positive today. I did get one for Michael, which maybe could be a future session, asking for an expansion on the ontology approach. But no other last minute questions.
Okay, well, we'll take that on board. So, future ontology approach, Michael. Do you fancy joining us for one of those in the future?
I'm in. Just let me know when and where.
Absolutely. So that's great. No, and thank you for your participation. Do you have any final comments that you'd like to wrap with?
I have two. One is we should do a lot more of these. So I think it was an outstanding format in curriculum, and I'm sure every person that was able to attend in whole or in part is going to be better for it. So we just need to do more of these. So I'm just going to put it back to VPS to say, are we doing this again next month? I'm ready. So right. it was a great output. I've said everything that I can think of saying, so I'll wrap on the idea that, partners are important, but just be careful how you pick them.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, be careful how you go. Be careful what you wish for. But I think absolutely, we've really got a lot out of this. We've enjoyed it, and there will be another one. I do believe that the boys behind the scenes are going to ask everyone the question what they'd like to see in the next one, and that might flash up on the Mentimeter any minute now. There you go. You'd think we'd rehearse this. So everybody who's still on the call, please pass your comments. They're not binding in any way, shape, or form, but they'll help us get feedback to see how we could shape this kind of event. Because I think we definitely feel it's, if nothing more, in working with partners to have conversations about what's important, where we are at the moment. In our own partnership journey has been important, and then to expand it to the group has really been quite special to be able to do that. Yeah. So, we're getting responses building up as we speak, and this is definitely, Andy, we need to look at this on the screen. So more about learning and the flow of work. I like that. Large-scale event planning, which is challenging in itself. Would like to learn more about training admin. Well, we'll get you on, Douglas, next time, because you're our resident expert in training administration, working with a group that you do in Barcelona there. So these are good, and I'd like, we will take them on board. Yeah. As we said to you all on a number of occasions, we will follow this up with direct response to you with packs and information, so please do stay connected. If you're not already following us on YouTube, if you're not already subscribing to us on LinkedIn, obviously feel free. But hopefully you'll have met some friends as well in the forum that you can continue conversations with. So yeah, I mean, I'm keen to wrap up in terms of making sure we don't fall foul of the time limit on LinkedIn. That's the first thing. In terms of what else we've got to say on the forum and looking around, I want to say a big thank you to the guys behind the scenes here. Absolutely. The quote before, it takes a village to make these things happen, and we've got a little village here with us in the UK as well as with the team in the US. So I know Tony's had to disappear. Big thanks to Tony. Big thanks to Annie from yesterday, from Lars, obviously. But behind the scenes here, we've got on our crew, Simon, we've got Sophie, we've got Aaron who's helped us with the sound today, and we've got Nick and Robin as well. And guys have really, I think, had a ball doing this. It's a bit different, as you'd understand, and it's nice to have that variation. And I guess in our own learning, taking it through partnership, we've made some new partnerships over the last couple of weeks pulling this together, and long may it continue. So, everybody, thanks a lot. We're going to wrap it up there, and we do hope to speak to you very soon. Thank you again. Yep.